Otaku in the Marvel DC universe. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction, so don't try any techniques you hear here in real life. Your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 476 Meet Fire. And so, Liang Yue strolled along, chatting with the others on the village platform. However, even though he was strolling, for him now, even just absent-mindedly walking forward meant his speed was anything but slow from a distance. His pace was comparable to that of a professional long-distance runner as the sun gradually peeked out from behind the hills in the distance, and golden sunlight broke through the thin mist. Liang Yue had already traversed the mountain path and was walking within the residential area outside Banliang City at this time. The sky was brightening, and most of the people here had already risen early, busying themselves with work and farming. Energetic shouts, sales pitches, and the occasional crowing of a rooster from afar blended into a symphony of sounds. Walking among them, Liang Yue felt exceptionally comfortable and at peace. Farmers, tenant farmers, small vendors, street performers, and the occasional lazy soldier passing by. People from all walks of life could be found here. However, compared to Beijing within the city walls, this suburban residential area was mostly inhabited by ordinary people from the lower and middle classes. He had heard that some time ago, small units of troops from northern foreign tribes had raided this area, but at this moment, Liang Yue could not see any signs of the people living in this bustling marketplace having suffered robbery or harm. Perhaps they were already used to it. Sniff sniff, it smells so good. Walking down the street, Liang Yue's Taoist robe made it easy for him to blend into the crowd, and soon the aroma of food wafted to his nose, attracting his attention. Turning his head, he saw that the source of the fragrance was a sesame cake stall. The vendors were a middle-aged couple with ring hair. The man was responsible for greeting customers and clearing tables, while the woman was in charge of sales. Seeing this, Liang Yue's eyes lit up. His stomach, which had already been full in the stronghold world, now felt a desire to eat again. Then, with a gentle push, he sent the person staggering backward a dozen steps before finally regaining his balance. Liang Yue didn't make things difficult for him, because before the other party acted, his intuition had already sensed that this person was just a little fellow who looked only 8 or 9 years old. He was dirty, his hair was matted in clumps, his clothes were ragged, and his exposed skin was covered with several scars of varying depths. It seemed that the other party was a repeat offender, but thinking carefully about a current era, Liang Yue could easily understand why the other party would take this path. Therefore, after pushing the other party away, he didn't continue to pursue the matter, but instead walked directly towards the old couple's stall. Old folks, how much are your sesame cakes? Hello, young Taoist priest. My sesame cakes have 3 kinds of fillings. Donkey meat is 5 coins each, mutton is 4 coins, and pork is 2 coins. The old couple had obviously noticed what had just happened, so when they saw Liang Yue coming over to ask about a price, a flattering expression involuntarily appeared on their faces. Give me 10 of each. As he spoke, Liang Yue reached into his pocket and placed a piece of silver weighing about 1 or 2 taels on the table. The old couple's faces immediately lit up with smiles, and they quickly and diligently used paper and string to tie up 3 bundles. 1 for each filing. The timeline of water margin probably takes place in the late Northern Song dynasty. Logically speaking, copper coins should be the mainstream currency for civilian transactions in this dynasty. Liang Yue certainly didn't have Song dynasty copper coins, but he had a lot of Yuan and Qing dynasty coins. However, water margin is not just a purely historical period, it also contains certain fictional elements. The heroes eating large pieces of meat, drinking from large bowls, and scattering silver were all basic, everyday occurrences. Even beef, which was strictly forbidden by the government in ancient times, was just a common food in some street shops here. For this reason, Liang Yue had already prepared a large amount of cash in advance to adapt to the pace of life here, not to mention the tons of silver metal he had transferred from China some time ago. Even just those scavenged from the late Qing and Yuan dynasties were enough for him to squander. Pui, holding 3 bundles of sesame cakes in his hand, Liang Yue had just turned around to leave when, across the street, the little kid he had pushed away earlier still seemed very resentful. While rubbing his wrist, he spat at him from across the street. It seemed that this little fellow still held a grudge against him. However, whenever the other party glanced at the sesame cakes in Liang Yue's hand, A hint of longing would flash in his clever eyes seeing this. Liang Yue didn't bother arguing with the other party. Instead, he took one of the bundles of sesame cakes and gently tossed it into the other party's arms. Don't do this next time, or you'll be beaten to death. After saying that, he ignored the other party's reaction and continued to stroll forward, biting into a sesame cake with relish. In a short while, he had already passed through the suburban residential area and arrived at the gate of Bianliang City. The gatekeepers briefly checked his Taoist certificate before letting him into the city. He had heard that household registration was a big problem in ancient dynasties. Even traveling to a nearby town required a certificate from the local authorities. However, the Taoist certificate was relatively free. Monks sometimes inevitably traveled around, practicing in the world, and were generally not subject to much control, especially during the current Song dynasty. Taoism was revered as the state religion, and it enjoyed many hidden conveniences that were not explicitly stated. After entering the city, needless to say, Liang Yue naturally wanted to meet up with Saya and Siko-senpai first. Without saying a word, he quickly arrived at a somewhat chaotic small market and found the shop where Saya was located. Without much effort, it seemed to be a shop mainly selling pastries and snacks, and also selling steamed buns, baked flatbreads, noodles, and the like. According to Liang Yue's understanding, in ancient society, without the outsourcing and convenient conditions of large-scale machine production, anyone doing this kind of noodle business, unless it was a high-end pastry shop that had already made a name for itself, otherwise, most of them could only earn hard-earned money opening a shop specifically to do this kind of business. How could it be as low-cost as Wu Dalin, carrying a shoulder pole and hawking along the street? No wonder, in the system's evaluation, the shop owned by Saya was already on the verge of failing. Chapter 477 Little Hoodlum Got You. At this moment, Saya-chan was dressed in a simple cloth dress, covered in dust, with one hand on her hip and the other holding a rolling pin, standing at the entrance of the small shop. Her original pigtails were still upright, but the style appeared much softer, and her temperament was slightly more gentle than before. More importantly, Saya's originally striking pink hair had been dyed black by the system by default. Opposite her, three people were standing. They looked like hooligans, their eyes lewd, their gazes fixed on Saya's chest, which was tightly wrapped in cloth, and they clearly weren't good people. However, these three obviously hadn't fared well either. Each of them had a bruised nose and a swollen face, shrinking back and baring their teeth, probably having already been beaten badly. Yet even so, the eyes of these three were still restless, staring straight at Saya across from them, as if they were bewitched. You, if you dare to come and cause trouble again, this grandma will break your legs. Get lost. Glancing to the side, Saya noticed Liang Yue's figure in the surrounding crowd, so she snorted coldly, uttered a harsh word, and turned back into the small shop. Seeing this, Liang Yue unconsciously grinned, then stepped out of the crowd and walked towards the shop. However, just as he passed the three small hooligans who were supporting each other, he was stopped by them after only a few steps. Hey, little Taoist, are you fucking ignoring us three brothers? Don't you want to hang out in the capital anymore? That's the woman my brothers have set their eyes on. Hiss, this little girl is really ruthless. Haha, but I like it. Little Taoist, be wise and get lost. Go far away, and don't come near this shop again, and don't buy anything from here. Did you hear that? I'm talking to you, I slap. Facing these three hooligans who were looking for trouble, Liang Yue naturally wouldn't be polite. With a flick of his sleeve, he sent out a burst of energy like an invisible palm. It slapped the three people hard across their faces. Instantly, half of their faces were swollen and red, becoming increasingly deep at a visible rate. At the same time, blood kept flowing from the corners of their mouths, and two of one person's teeth were directly knocked out. Go, don't let me see you again. After saying that, Liang Yue walked straight into the small shop without looking back. The three men who had been slapped by him were obviously stunned. They looked as if someone had lit a firecracker directly in their heads. For a moment, their entire vision was blank. After a long while, they gradually recovered, relying on his superhuman hearing. Even from a distance and amidst the noisy crowd, Liang Yue could still hear the other parties howling, but he never expected that this was only his first time entering Bianliang City, and he had already encountered such an important plot character. At the same time as he was deeply surprised, Liang Yue also felt a little emotional for Gao Chu, a person who could be said to be full of dramatic color, who could jump from the bottom of society to the rank of Grand Commandant of the dynasty. He also felt strange looking through the legendary experience of this person. He could only sigh. It's really fate that fools people. Have you eaten? Looking up at Saya-chan across the counter, and Siko-senpai, who had unexpectedly arrived one step ahead. Liang Yue immediately took out 2 stacks of baked wheaten cakes from his storage backpack and greeted them. Didn't we just eat outside? Although she said that, when Saya leaned over to smell it, she couldn't help but take one when she found the aroma was compelling. Siko-senpai next to her was no exception, eating in small bites while asking so. According to our previous communication, Liang Yue, are you planning to find a Taoist temple outside the city to settle down? Yes, the public world is a long-term communication place for us, so we always need a fixed window. If we can take this opportunity to establish a sect, it would be a good choice after all. Didn't I get 100 free native quotas before? As he said that, Liang Yue also leaned against the counter, looking at a person outside the door who was curiously peeking and discovering that it was a little girl with double buns and thick clothes, about only 4 or 5 years old. He turned to smile at her. The little girl seemed a little shy at this time. After looking at Liang Yue, she immediately shrank behind the door frame. After a while, she drilled out again a pair of big eyes, with a strong color of curiosity. I don't plan to join your sect for the time being. I still want to continue running this small shop. After listening to Liang Yue's words, Saya-chan also expressed her opinion. Then, she took a few baked wheaten cakes from the counter, wrapped them in oiled paper, walked to the door, squatted down, and handed them to the little girl with a smile. After that, the two of them started whispering their well, then do as you please. Anyway, we came here for training. Liang Yue naturally had no objections when he heard this. In fact, compared to the Taoist temple in the suburbs, he also liked the urban life in the city very much. There was enough popularity, and he could integrate into all aspects of life, which should have a good promoting effect on his cultivation. Fortunately, the Taoist temple in the suburbs is not far from the city. Moreover, forming a sect is a kind of training in itself, and it can also experience many lives that you had never felt before. Then I'll stay and help Saya too. I've been busy fighting monsters and leveling up for a while. It's been a long time since I've been able to calm down and have a good rest for a while. After Siko-senpai finished speaking, a brave and capable face unconsciously brought a bit of laziness. Liang Yue naturally supported her idea with both hands. In fact, it was not only Siko-senpai, but the other 3 members of the dungeon assault team, Hinata, Alwyn, and Non-Lixiang, also needed to adjust for a while. A long time of brushing monsters and going to dungeons has occupied too much of their energy, so that now their minds are full of killing, and sometimes their eyes are red, and it is difficult to adjust for a while. Although it is not comparable to Liang Yue's level, who has really killed tens of thousands of people in another world. The impact of brushing monsters in the dungeon on people is also not small. Don't look at Siko-senpai's calm and gentle appearance at this time, but in fact, she has been suppressing it all the time. Moreover, they don't have Liang Yue's whose specialization in expert-level regular script calligraphy represented by the sub-professional system. If they want to adjust their state, they can only pin their hopes on the cultivation of the spiritual aspect. It doesn't seem right. Speaking of which, system. If I share these 2 skills, can I indirectly increase their spiritual cultivation? Chapter 478 Bianlian Yang. Soon, in just about a morning, the women scattered around the Bianlian area arrived in the city one by one, eventually gathering at Sayatakaji's shop except for Rachel. This little female hawk is still busy searching for the whereabouts of Little Kong. As for Little Kong, his identity is only that of Liang Yue's contracted battle pet, and he cannot use the village platform himself. Therefore, unless Liang Yue goes to find him personally, relying on the contract link between them, it would probably take Rachel several days to find a monkey in the vast Kinling Mountains. Liang Yue, the matter of the Taoist temple has been arranged. My master has also agreed and said he will pack up and prepare to go south soon. You just need to take the money over for the handover within 3 days. Okay, I know. No need to wait 3 days, I'll go over later. Zaya Ozeo, what about your side? I've already conveyed the matter of the transaction to them, but they're still a little hesitant, seemingly because they're reluctant to part with their foundation. I heard that the sect I'm in now has been operating for more than a dozen generations. It existed even before the founding of the Great Song Dynasty, with a long heritage. Unlike the Taoist temple where Buhu is so, the Taoist sect you're in is a big one. Are there any cultivation methods passed down? It only costs 200 points. How can you expect such a good thing? Apart from some simple self-defense techniques, at least I haven't seen any experts in the sect. That means there's another reason. By the way, Saya, what kind of business do you want to do with this shop in the future? Selling only pastries doesn't seem very popular. I suggest adding some exquisite modern desserts, and some specialties from our place. Yes, like chocolate, jam, milk, cheese, maple syrup, and nuts. It doesn't have to specialize in pastries. Wine is also good, just sell glass directly. All kinds of glassware, and mirrors, those things are priceless treasures here. The profit is absolutely amazing, but that would be too eye-catching, and it might make us a target. I think it's better to keep a low profile. After all, we're only here for training. Well, how about selling glasses? Although the kind of thing is rare, only scholars and the elderly would find it useful, and the materials are mostly resin. It's not too flashy, and the profit is very high. If it's modern glasses, it's still too advanced for the people here. In my opinion, various cotton cloths, silk cloths, wool, and other clothing are very good. Liang Yue, what do you think? Why don't you sell hair dye? On the way here, I saw a lot of people with gray hair, whether they were old or middle-aged, they all need it. I'll think about it. It's so pitiful. This is just a small section of the road I passed through among the refugees. I've long heard of the records in ancient books of land turning red for thousands of miles and people eating each other. According to the current rules, they would probably be incorporated into the Xiong army, with a court providing for them. They would then be assigned to various labor-intensive tasks, such as military equipment, craftsmanship, breeding, and land reclamation. However, the status of the army in the Song dynasty was relatively low, and their interests could easily be encroached upon by their direct superiors, civil officials, and local gentry. Eventually falling into a state of semi-dead servitude, such an army would not have much combat power. Of course, the prerequisite for becoming a Xiong soldier is that they must be able to survive until the imperial decree is issued. Moreover, such young children must also be able to withstand the exclusion of the people around them. Relatively speaking, this is already a very good countermeasure. Boys will be incorporated into the Xiong army. What about the girls? They will also become Xiong soldiers, but the jobs they are responsible for are different. However, before being officially incorporated, most of them will be selected by some forces and families. Some of them will become maids, some will become courtesans, and some may be adopted. Then let's adopt them. Chun-Q. That's right. Anyway, Liang Yue, didn't you just want to establish a sect? I didn't say no, and besides, haven't you already brought them here? Even though it had only been a morning since they had separated, the women still had a lot to talk about. After reuniting among them, the most attention was paid to Yuriko and Alwyn, who had descended as refugees because, along with the two women, there were also a group of children aged 7 or 8, or even 4 or 5. Each of them brought a dozen or so. And the two of them together made up 30 or 40, both boys and girls. All of them were refugees without exception. They were all children rescued by the two of them on their way to Bianlian with the fleeing group. At this time, these little guys were devouring 8 treasure porridge and fruits under the hospitality of the women. After they finished, each of them was given a cup of milk. Looking at these skinny, poorly clothed, pitiful little guys, Liang Yue couldn't help but scratch his head for a moment. Yes, he decided to set up a sect here and play a related development game. That's right, but the sect's residence hasn't been settled yet. In just less than a morning, the disciples had already been passively acquired. Was this method too casual? Before this, he had not anticipated this at all, but maybe this is life. Surprises, sometimes, do come a little suddenly. Faced with Yuriko and Alwyn's requests, Liang Yue naturally couldn't refuse. Anyway, he didn't lack the resources and energy to raise these children. It's just that there was a problem with the steps of establishing the sect. Just make an impromptu adjustment like this. I'll go and inquire about the location of the brokers in Bianlian City later, and buy a larger house to find a place to live for ourselves first after settling down temporarily. The matter of the Taoist temple outside the city is not urgent. If Xiao's sect is unwilling to sell, it doesn't matter. We can completely buy a piece of land and build a new one ourselves. After thinking about it, Liang Yue spoke. Upon hearing this, the women beside him immediately lit up. They were naturally not because Liang Yue had promised to solve the problem, or had found a way to solve the resettlement of these children, but simply because they had become interested in the existence of brokers. Brokers were important trading places and intermediaries in ancient China. With a very long history, they had officially existed since the Han Dynasty and had been recognized by official forces. Almost running through the entire feudal civilization history of China for such a famous functional commercial base. The women had already learned about it after landing in the public world MIC, and when Liang Yue mentioned it again at this time, they naturally had the urge to go and see it. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 479 Gongshu Family? However, not everyone chose to go shopping with Liang Yue. Yuriko, Alwyn, Hinata, and Xiao Zhao volunteered to stay behind and take care of the children in the store before leaving. Liang Yue also specially found a sturdy wooden box and put half a ton of loose gold into it. On the way to the brokerage, they first entered a gold and silver shop said to be the largest in Tokyo, deposited the pile of gold in it, and then exchanged it for a pile of notes that could be used for actual transactions according to the common exchange rate. Half a ton is equal to 1,000 catties. After the Song dynasty, including the Song dynasty, 1 catty is equal to 16 taels, so this batch of gold totaled 16,000 taels. Generally speaking, 1 tael of gold is equal to 100 taels of silver, and 1 tael of silver is equal to 1,000 copper coins, which is commonly referred to as 1 string of cash. Therefore, Liang Yue exchanged for more than 1 million strings of cash on this trip. Not much, however, considering that the current water margin heroes is a real world. Liang Yue could not really deposit a dozen tons of gold into the gold and silver shop at one time. Therefore, he can only take his time after dragging their feet all the way, buying a lot of snacks, candied fruits, and beautiful clothes and toys. They finally brought the girls to the brokerage. Upon learning that Liang Yue wanted to buy land and did not care about the cost, the clerk immediately invited them to a side room, a trading place specializing in land and real estate. Then, he led them to a delicate large sand table and enthusiastically introduced some of the properties and land for sale on it. The whole process seemed exceptionally professional compared with some real estate sales markets. In reality, it is not inferior. Liang Yue looked at the sand table in front of him and realized that it was a model that almost covered the entire Bianliang city and its surrounding areas. Its workmanship was extremely exquisite. Except for the mountains and hills outside the city, most of it was made of pure wood. However, why say almost? That's because, although this sand table was planned and made according to the entire Bianliang city, what is now in front of him is only the houses and land in the suburbs that are within the scope of sale. Missing a piece here and there, although clear at a glance, also seems a bit unharmonious. Therefore, if it were placed in front of someone who is not familiar with the Tokyo area, it would inevitably make people feel confused. This sand table is so exquisite. Looking at the model in front of him that was almost exactly the same in proportion, Liang Yue couldn't help but marvel. And his heart was even more surprised. Of course, he knew about sand tables. The earliest clear records appeared in the Han Dynasty, but Liang Yue heard for the first time that the sand table in the Song Dynasty could reach this level of precision. As expected, Taoist priest has extraordinary knowledge. This was personally ordered by our official family, instructing the descendants of the Gongshu family to build it themselves. It is said that it took more than a year of polishing before it took shape. The clerk next to him immediately explained to him upon hearing this, and his expression unconsciously carried a bit of pride and envy. I see. After roughly learning the reason, in the following time, Liang Yue and others began to enter the shopping mode. The focus was naturally on buying a mansion in this Bianliang city. The owner of this house is said to be the previous generation's Yuan Weilang of the Ministry of Revenue, and the house was also renovated bit by him at a huge cost. In terms of location, in the eyes of the more traditional residents of Bianjing City, it is not considered very good because this mansion is far from the imperial city and not close to the residential area of officials, but close to the activity area of merchants. However, the benefits of this are also obvious, that is, the price is relatively cheap, and the authority of middle-level officials in the court can also suppress the surrounding merchants to a certain extent. This Yuan Weilang master also relied on his own power advantage, bit by bit, both soft and hard, and finally secretly annexed several courtyards around his mansion, and then quietly renovated it in the end. After the mansion was completed, the original 3-in-1 courtyard with standard specifications was forcibly expanded into 4. Unlike on the left, right, and rear sides, another layer of courtyards was superimposed respectively. After being opened and renovated, many rare flowers and trees were transplanted, and combined together, it was almost like a park. Unfortunately, in the end, this Yuan Weilang was taken down by the backstage of some merchants because of certain mistakes, and the house was naturally taken over by the current emperor. However, recently, in order to raise funds to cope with the increasingly tense military pressure in the north, it has been included in the sales list of the brokerage. The location of this mansion is not very good, but it is definitely not bad. After all, it is still in the capital of Bianlian, and the area itself is large enough. It's just that, due to the frequent border incursions by the Liao people in the north recently some time ago, even small groups of soldiers and horses wandered to the suburbs outside the city. Affected by this, house prices have also fluctuated to a certain extent. However, The fluctuations are not too large at this time. Most of the landlords and gentry in Tokyo City, including those outside the city, are still looking around, worrying about whether to move their families south. The Taoist sect to which Xiao Zhao belongs is one of them. However, this is definitely not a disturbing factor for Liang Yue, because he clearly knows that before the end of the entire water margin plot, the area around Bianliang City is still relatively stable. Even after a group of water margin heroes were recruited, they once fought the Liao people back repeatedly, and it seemed that they were about to collapse back to their grandmother's house. This should be a fabrication and overhead plot on the original water margin, and of course, it is also possible that Decking not only changed the history of Ming when compiling the Siku Quanchu, but also revised the history of Song. By the way, in short, if it weren't for the fact that a group of civil officials in the court were afraid that the heroes would make too much merit and change the pattern of governing the military with literature, and jointly sent the Liangshan people to the south to fight Fang La, at least in this world of water margin heroes, the future may be a different direction. Back to the topic. In summary, Liang Yue finally spent about 200 caddies of gold, which is more than 300,000 taels of silver, a total of more than 300,000 strings of copper coins, to buy this mansion. At the same time, he also bought a basically undeveloped mountain in the southeast direction outside Bianliang City. Among them, this mountain is also connected to the Taoist temple where Yang Yue is located, which is about to be relocated. If the Taoist sect where Xiao Zhao is located is also willing to sell the land and leave, then Liang Yue may become the largest landlord in the southeast corner outside Tokyo City. It is a pity that there are mostly mountains and barren hills there, with many native forests and a mixture of soil and rocks. In addition to producing some game, wood, and wild herbs, it is basically not worth much money. Of course, the sect is not something that Liang Yue can build just by saying it, especially in the surrounding area of the capital. Afterwards, he will definitely have to register and file with the relevant local departments, and these all need to be approved by the court. Fortunately, if he can successfully buy the small Taoist temple where Yang Yue is located, he should be able to avoid some unnecessary troubles to a certain extent. Chapter 480. Liu Ain Villa. After coming out, Liang Yue and the others, accompanied by the staff of the brokerage, took a carriage all the way to the location of the residence. Unexpectedly, after being taken into the imperial court's possession for so long, the mansion showed no signs of neglect or dilapidation. Pushing open the door, what came into view was a rather well-maintained scenery. The green bricks and glazed tiles, the stone platforms and pavilions, although looking quite old, did not have the slightest sense of obsolescence. Instead, a sense of ancient simplicity and unadorned elegance greeted them. In February and March, the trees and flowers in the courtyard had not yet reached the time to bloom with vigorous vitality, looking a bit bare. However, both the shapes and growth trajectories were trimmed in a well-organized and orderly manner. Continuing deeper into the mansion, artificial hills, pavilions, long corridors, and gardens were naturally surrounded by a winding expanse of clear water. At this time, a thin layer of ice covered the water surface, and occasionally a few colorful fish could be seen floating from the water. At the edge of the mansion was a bamboo forest, connected to the area outside the courtyard wall. Even so, within the courtyard, it was almost impossible to see any messy dead branches or fallen leaves. Obviously, in the past, specialists would come here to maintain it every once in a while. This was vastly different from the chaotic scene that Liang Yue had anticipated and mentally prepared for, a place occupied by unknown members of the beggar clan, covered in dog feces, urine, and weeds. Opening the back door of the mansion revealed a tree-lined path, with simple fences on both sides. At the end of the path was another small river with flowing water on this side of the river, a small pier, a bamboo pavilion, and even the entire bamboo forest were also within the scope of the mansion's property ownership. After a general tour of the entire mansion, Liang Yue pondered in his heart and then nodded in satisfaction. He thought to himself that it was worth spending the gold to acquire such a mansion in the capital of the country. The only pity was that the rooms of this residence, which should have been filled with various valuable furniture, exquisite potted flowers and plants, utensils, porcelain, calligraphy, and paintings, were now all empty. The reason was self-evident. After being confiscated by the imperial court, all these things had been taken away. If based on the current market price, repurchasing everything according to the specifications and size of this mansion, plus the later decoration, embellishment, carving, and other labor costs, to make this place feel full again, it would cost at least as much as buying such a mansion. Roughly calculated, including the previous spending on buying the house, it would cost about 700,000 or 800,000 strings of cash. This price, even compared to the housing prices and decoration costs in the capital of the previous life, was not inferior at all, and ordinary people could definitely not afford it. Fortunately, Liang Yue was not an ordinary wage earner. Money was secondary. The key was that Liang Yue had resources. Moreover, he could create all kinds of furniture, utensils, and a wide variety of decorations himself. The materials were free, and the process was quite simple, saving time and effort therefore. After completing the handover with the brokerage staff and sending away the middle-aged man who was disappointed and unwilling because he failed to receive the subsequent decoration order, Liang Yue, teacher Shizuka, senior Siko, and others immediately took out their toolboxes and various wooden and metal raw materials and began to act enthusiastically from the most basic beds, tables, chairs, benches, glass, bookshelves, and the perpetually burning magma stove, to the beautiful window lattices, carvings, various metal ornaments, and exquisitely styled lampstands that could only be made in the upgraded toolbox, etc. Like magic, one by one, they were thrown onto the open space by everyone, and then filled into their respective rooms according to each person's preferences. In the end, even some rooms dedicated to the side courtyard for the servants to rest were arranged by the temporarily inspired crowd. After finishing all this, Liang Yue directly spread out a piece of rice paper on the table, took a large brush, and impromptu wrote the 4 characters Flowing Cloud Villa on it. He planned to find an experienced craftsman in the city who specializes in making plaques to make one for his mansion when he had time. After all this was done, unknowingly, the time had already come to dusk at this time. The sun in the sky was slowly falling down the hill under the reflection of the sunset. The light gradually dimmed, and the world became slightly cold. Fortunately, half an hour ago, Nerd Hisago and Yang Yue, who had already notified Yuriko and others in the small shop of their movements through the village platform by now, they should be almost here, right? Sure enough, just as everyone had just cleaned up the surrounding scraps and arranged a pile of ingredients and fruits around a magma stove in the middle courtyard's garden, the thick front door was pushed open. The first to walk in were naturally Yuriko, Alwyn, and Hinata, and behind them, of course, there was also a group of thin and small figures. However, compared to their previous appearance in the small shop, with messy hair and inadequate clothing, the group of children had now changed into thick-clothed cyan black Taoist robes, plus a white right lapel lining, and a uniform-style pure wool black robe on the outside. It must be said that with such a dress, each of them really had the feeling of a Taoist child. And fortunately, even with such equipment as a supplement, the faces of these little guys still seemed a little uneasy, and after entering this mansion, a trace of panic appeared on their faces in addition to nervousness. Looking at that appearance, it seemed that they were very afraid of being sold. Of course, not all the children were like this. Among the 30 or 40 children, Liang Yue discovered a few who were quite courageous. Although their bodies still seemed weak, their eyes had already begun to shine. After you're done, you'll rest in these 2 rows of houses in the middle courtyard tonight. Men and women can freely combine and 4 people can live in each room. Do you all remember? Remembered, Rem. Remembered, Rem. That's good. Let's start eating now. Eat slowly, and chew carefully. Looking at this group of children in front of him, who, because of his words, began to force themselves to nibble on the bread crusts bit by bit, sip the mushroom soup bit by bit, and endure their body's desire for food, for fear of being scolded or beaten. If they didn't do well, Liang Yue couldn't help but curl the corners of his mouth at this time, and then turned and returned to his seat. The women here seemed to be talking about installing lights and monitoring facilities in this mansion. At this moment, they seemed to have discussed some technical issues regarding the specific line installation. Hearing this, Liang Yue couldn't help but think of the power plant device from the Forager world that he had drawn from the system before. Since it was a product of the game world, the thing itself did not need to follow the so-called physical rules to a certain extent after landing, as long as it was within a certain range around the power plant. All electrical appliances would be automatically powered on. Although after being transformed by the system, it could no longer generate electricity out of thin air like in the game, and needed to constantly consume various items to complete the power generation steps. But in Liang Yue's hands, didn't he still have a batch of arc reactors? With nuclear fusion, was there still a fear of not having electricity available? Chapter 481 Imperial City Division. After the feast, the women returned to their respective rooms, while Liang Yue remained alone in the courtyard. He placed a fine iron mesh over the lava stove, casually scattered some peanuts and dried fruit on it, and sat down beside it with a cup of hot chocolate. He savored his snack while contemplating his next move secretly. He had never ceased practicing the Mu Luo Sutra. If Liang Yue weren't wearing a face accessory and his eyes weren't concealed, one would see a faint halo emanating from them according to the sutra. This indicated that his practice of the Muluo Sutra was nearing completion. Counting the time, Liang Yue had only obtained the sutra a little over 2 months ago, even with the benefits from the stronghold world. It was only been half a year being able to complete the practice of such an esoteric internal cultivation method in such a short time was not only due to his talent, but more importantly, to Liang Yue's own cultivation level already at the foundation establishment stage. All the meridians within his body, including capillaries and nerve endings, were completely connected and integrated in this state. Liang Yue would naturally achieve more with less effort when practicing lower-level cultivation methods. I wonder what kind of eye-related supernatural power I will awaken when this technique is fully mastered. Thinking of this, Liang Yue gently sipped the hot drink in his hand, his heart filled with anticipation according to the system's initial introduction. After completing the entire cultivation method and reaching the great accomplishment stage, the practitioner would spontaneously develop a supernatural secret technique due to prolonged training and nourishment. Moreover, the nature of this secret technique would be closely related to and complementary to the energy within the practitioner's body. Besides, the practitioner's eyes could become a part of the body, like hands and feet, to launch attacks at targets. Imagine, in a martial arts world, two top experts are confronting each other, using all their inner strength to resist. At this moment, one of them suddenly glares, and two streams of sword energy shoot out directly. The effect would be extraordinary. Of course, with Liang Yue's current realm in power, launching attacks and gaining surprise victories were optional. What he valued most was the attribute of randomly generating a supernatural power. On closer thought, this was almost in the same vein as his Tensigan, and the intangible and amino abilities awakened from his eyes. The energy Liang Yue used in his daily practice to stimulate and train the meridians of his eyes was the everlasting vitality art spiritual power, enhanced by lightning, fire, and wood. Unknowingly, the sky grew dark, and a bright moon gradually descended from the high center of the sky. Even the watchmen who occasionally passed by began to seem listless. Around 3 or 4 in the morning, a rustling, almost imperceptible footstep sound suddenly began to come from the periphery of the residence. Liang Yue, who was in closed-eye meditation, was in a state of complete relaxation and natural release of his divine sense. These slight movements naturally could not escape his detection. 3 men in night clothes had quietly arrived outside the courtyard wall, and with a light leap, they landed inside his residence like nimble swallows. Then, the 3 began to cooperate with each other, quietly listening and probing in the courtyard. From their actions, Liang Yue vaguely saw a well-trained discipline, suggesting that they were not just ordinary thieves. Moreover, although the 3 were only wearing simple black clothes, the fabric seemed to be of high quality. Judging from this, their origin should not be simple. Soon, the 3 made their way along the corners of the walls and the shadows of the plants to the central courtyard where everyone lived. In the process, they paid considerable attention to the newly built hot spring in the side courtyard. Seeing this, Liang Yue didn't stand on ceremony with a thought. He directly used the domain power of lightning, fire, and wood to imprison the 3 in the air, and then wrapped them up and flew over 2 layers of courtyard walls to his front without any reason. Breaking into my residence at night, may I ask what the purpose of the 3 of you is? Opening his eyes, Liang Yue looked at the 3 men in black, who were now showing shock and horror, and asked curiously, "Ahem, well, the 3 of us are under orders from the Imperial City Division. We came here to investigate the reality of the Taoist priest. If we have offended you, please forgive us." One of them, who seemed to be the leader, heard this and immediately came back to his senses. He was quite straightforward at this time, coughed lightly, and cupped his fist at Liang Yue, explaining his intentions. The look in his eyes was as if it would shine in his words. He didn't play any tricks of unyielding to the death. The Imperial City Division? So, my spending a huge sum of money to buy a house and land in this Bianliang city during the day has attracted your attention. Hearing this, Liang Yue didn't feel any surprise. He subconsciously thought of some of his previous actions. Liang Yue was, after all, under the feet of the emperor, in the most important place of the entire Great Song dynasty. Being noticed by the legendary official secret service was indeed because his actions during the day were a bit reckless. Think about it, first depositing half a ton of gold in the money house, and then spending 200 caddies of gold to buy a house and land. This kind of financial power is indeed worth paying attention to. Even in modern society, it's not something that just anyone can do. That's right. However, financial power is secondary. We have come here to investigate the Taoist priest's purpose in coming to Bianliang. Saying that, the leader of the men in black directly took off the black cloth on his face, revealing an ordinary face with a slightly dark complexion. Seeing this, the 2 behind him also took off the cover on their faces. Liang Yue reached out to them, signaling them to sit down. My purpose in coming to Bianliang is very simple. It is to establish a sect. I have always practiced Taoism with my master on Mount Hui, but not long ago my master ascended to immortality. I, on the other hand, am ready to enter the world to practice. As for the identity issue, when I entered the city today, I showed the city guard my Taoist registration IC. No wonder the Taoist priest also bought a mountain outside the southeast corner of Bianliang. Hearing this, the man in black showed a thoughtful look on his face. Not only that, I recently heard that some nearby Taoist temples are also moving south, and if conditions permit, I will also consider buying their mountain gates. What the sect teaches. Is it the immortal art that the Taoist priest just used? It's just some martial arts. It looks rare, but it's just because it has been cultivated to a certain level. If that's all, the Taoist priest can use what he has learned, and we will do our best to cooperate with the Taoist priest's wish to enter the world to practice. That's easy to say. When the time comes, I will have to trouble you all to facilitate the opening of the sect. Chapter 482 Renzong in Chapter X27, S. Prosperous Reign. In the time that followed, the three from the Imperial City Division stayed and chatted with Liang Yue for a while. However, upon realizing that he had no intention of pouring them tea or treating them with proper etiquette, they wisely ended their rather unsuitable visit and hastily took their leave. After they left, Liang Yue continued to cultivate in the same spot. He continued until the sky began to brighten, and the women in the room began to rise and start their morning exercises. The little ones in the guest rooms also finished washing up and waited beside him. Unsure of what to do, Liang Yue had already spread out Zhuan paper on a square table, his mind focused, his spirit calm and composed. Practicing his calligraphy at a leisurely pace, this continued until the sun was fully bright, and Yuriko and the others had prepared breakfast, the aroma of food filling the entire garden. Only then did Liang Yue slowly stretch, rinse the brush in the pot, and toss it aside. He sat down to eat while discussing their plans for the next few days with everyone. Later, it seems we'll need to find a few more servants to maintain this residence, otherwise, relying on ourselves, we probably won't have the energy to do these things. Liang Yue looked up at the surrounding houses, which were well arranged and elegant, and then spoke. Unlike his small village in the stronghold world, due to the special rules of heaven and earth, there was no such thing as dust or decay in the Mick world. Once something, a building, was made, it would theoretically remain unchanged forever unless someone deliberately damaged it. Therefore, in the stronghold world, the women would occasionally improve and upgrade the buildings in the village when they were in the mood, but there was never any concept of maintenance or repair because their maintenance was simply not needed. The current water margin world was completely different. This was a real world with complete rules of heaven and earth, not as convenient as Mick. The purpose of everyone's visit was cultivation and training. It would be truly difficult for them to calm down and regularly clean and sweep this building every day. It's more than that. Me and Hinata were discussing it before bed last night, and we think we should find some teachers for these children to teach them how to read and write. We probably won't have time to manage these things ourselves. Alwyn, at this moment, was using a fork to pick up a piece of peach, dipping it in a jam dish next to her, and gently putting it into her mouth as she spoke leisurely. Oh, so troublesome. If we count it like this, if we want to wait for these little ones to grow up, I'm afraid we'll have to wait many more years. By then Nangguang Liu Xiang seemed a little troubled at this time, looking at the group of children opposite her who were silently eating with a cautious look. No one knew what she was thinking. Then let's find them. There should be many people in Bianliang City who do this kind of business. It's also a good opportunity to temper your personalities. Later, Nangguang Liu Xiang, Yuan Siko can go find some scholars and servants to come back. Liang Yue couldn't help but smile slightly when he heard this. Unlike the fast-paced combat life when running dungeons, teaching and educating young disciples requires patience. Everyone, who had already become accustomed to the rhythm of life in the stronghold world, really needed to consciously adjust their current focus in life. What about you? You're not going to stay here and practice calligraphy and play the erhu again, are you? Nangguang Liu Xiang asked him back with a slant of her eyes, her face full of displeasure. Of course, I'm going to the Taoist temple where Bu Wei and Xiao Zhao are, and I also have to take a look at the mountain that we took down before. Oh right. The people from the Imperial City Division came before. As he spoke, Liang Yue told the women about the uninvited special agents who had come a few hours earlier, so that they could be mentally prepared if they were to come again. They wouldn't accidentally start a conflict when dealing with personnel from official institutions. It would definitely be more beneficial for Liang Yue and the others to be able to talk calmly, if possible soon. After explaining their respective tasks for the day and chatting for a few more words, everyone set off and headed to various parts of Liang City. Takagi-saya pulled Shizuka-sensei to her small shop, preparing to start a new business in commercial planning. Nangguang Liu Xiang, Siko, and Alwyn inquired all the way and went to the nearby talent market. A group of little kids, led by Yuriko and Hinata, wandered around their own house, familiarizing themselves with the layout of the house. Just like that, in the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. Everything was proceeding in an orderly manner under the women's money offensive. The matters of the butler, servants, and teachers had now been completed and in place due to the successive arrival of a large number of refugees. Various talents in Liang City had also begun to show signs of exploding while shopping. Nangguang Liu Xiang and the others didn't spend much effort, and they found a few scholars who were forced to flee the famine in the pile of people outside the city along with them. Even their family members were signed as servants in addition, for the sake of the future mountain gate. They also specially found 3 chefs with a lot of work experience to be responsible for the back kitchen. As a result, the originally somewhat empty mansion also began to become lively. Liang Yue had also signed a transfer agreement with the abbot of the Taoist temple where Yang Yue was located, and took over the land property of the Taoist temple and its affiliated mountain. The official relocation was within the next few days. The sect behind Xiaozhou was still hesitating. Not until half a day later, when the middle-aged man from the Imperial City Division who had broken into Liang Yu's house again came to the door and brought him an invitation. Did Liang Yue understand the reason? So it's the old emperor, it's his birthday. 3 days later, a banquet will be held in the palace for Grandmaster level figures from the 9 streams of the 3 religions. Grandmaster level. It seems that the move I showed before was indeed a bit useful, but the current emperor, at the beginning of the water margin plot, should still be Emperor Rinzong Zhaozhen. Right. The entire plot probably starts with Rinzong and ends with Huzong. If even Gaochua is included, it seems to include a bit of the early Southern Song dynasty. No wonder. Thinking of this, Liang Yue began to understand the thoughts and the hearts of those sects. You must know that the era in which the Northern Song dynasty was located at this time was a genuine golden age. Known in history as the reign of Rinzong. Even if it was already the end of Rinzong's reign, the annexation of land in the world was becoming increasingly serious, and the Great Song dynasty already had signs of decline. The remaining virtues and ambitions of Emperor Rinzong still existed. Perhaps they were still feeling grateful and pinning their hopes on the imperial court being able to revitalize its strength and show the heroic posture of the Chaizong lineage back then. This emperor is having a birthday and inviting me, a newly arrived young Taoist, to a banquet can be considered thoughtful etiquette, so I have to carefully consider the aspect of birthday gifts. Chapter 483 went to the wrong set? In the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. During these 3 days, the rhythm of life in the Liang family had begun to fall into place for the sake of the children's education. Liang Yue and the others had specially renovated a small courtyard to serve as a teaching location and residence for the teacher and their family. In addition, various classics and historical collections such as the 3-character classic, 1000-character classic, Analects, Doctrine of the Mean, and other Enlightenment teaching materials, as well as writing tools, were purchased in abundance. Xie Chan, who was almost overwhelmed by the sheer number of profitable business opportunities, had finally managed to find her niche. That is, she wanted to transform her small shop into a general store selling a little bit of everything. Its form was almost entirely copied from the supermarket model. In reality, to this end, this young lady even spent money to take over the shops on both sides of her own. That boldness was comparable to Liang Yue's. In addition, the establishment of the Mountain Gate had also begun to move forward after taking over the Taoist temple where Yang Yue was located. In order not to expose everyone's abilities, Liang Yue had been putting on an act for the past few days, specially hiring several batches of professional construction and construction experts to go to his mountain to observe and survey in order to prepare for the design of the sect in advance. He would start construction as soon as the people in the original Taoist temple moved out. Under his heavy reward, a batch of high-quality building materials had already begun to be transported to the southeast outskirts of Bianlian. They were just waiting for the designers to produce specific construction drawings for Liang Yue to choose from before construction could begin. This day, at noon, Liang Yue carried the gift he had prepared for the current emperor, and headed towards the imperial city at a leisurely pace. In fact, Liang Yue's home was not close to the imperial city. Originally, he wanted to ride a horse there, but the Song dynasty lacked horses. The lack of vast grassland plains in the north meant that horse resources were naturally subject to strict control measures. Therefore, riding horses was restricted among the people. Even officials usually could only ride donkeys, mules, cattle, and so on. Liang Yue originally had a donkey by his side at the beginning, But someone thought the thing was too cheap and did not match his status, especially since it didn't match the gorgeous Taoist robe he was wearing today, so he simply walked over. Yes, in order to be worthy of the emperor's birthday party, and to live up to the imposing manner of the soon-to-be appointed sect leader, Liang Yue was no longer wearing his original simple, dark green Taoist robe with a white inner lining. Instead, he had changed into a Taoist robe that he had uniquely designed. Well, to say it was designed, it was actually just borrowed. Simply put, his current Taoist robe was actually borrowing the original design of the Taoist uniform from a certain online game in his previous life. In last year's Christmas gift box lottery, Liang Yue had once drawn a complete set of Wanhua fashion, a combination of purple, white, and black, and the Taoist robe he is wearing now comes from Chunyang, a black and white color scheme, with the golden bias embroidery patterns embellishing the collar, shoulder corners, and the ends of the sleeves. Magnificent, detached from the world, and unique. After Liang Yue thought of the style of the clothes, he specially ordered the intelligent brain Xiao Wu to make them, and even the materials used were very extraordinary. After putting on such a Taoist robe, it immediately dressed up his already handsome figure and that face of a prince, making him rare in the world, shining like an immortal. Affected by this, the women around him also made requests to him, preparing to have such a set made as well, and they also took the opportunity to directly classify this Taoist robe designed by Liang Yue as the unified clothing of the sect after the mountain gate was established. However, in terms of specifications, the disciples' attire would naturally not be the same as Liang Yue's. The sect leader So, Xiao Zhao, Hinata, teacher Shizuka, and others also came up with ingenious ideas, using the color scheme and contrast of the clothing as a sign to distinguish their respective ranks. Generally speaking, the higher the status in the sect, the higher the contrast of the clothing color scheme. For example, Liang used black and white colors as the sect leader. Xiang, who was self-appointed as the elder of the sect, mainly used black and purple. The next level of elite disciples were black and blue, and so on, followed by black and cyan, black and green, and so on. Liang Yue didn't have any objections to this. Anyway, he came to this world to gain experience. Since they were interested in operating these trivial matters, it would be good to let them have their way. Wearing such a gorgeous Taoist robe, Liang Yue was originally afraid that his outfit would be too eye-catching if he really entered the palace, not to mention violating any taboos. Even if he was treated like a monkey and watched, it would inevitably be a bit embarrassing. The worst of them were all purple gold existences. They simply ignored the current official clothing regulations, laws, and various regulations stipulated by the court. To say it was modern online game style would be an objective description. Liang Yue's outfit could only be considered moderate. The most low-key and conservative person in the crowd was probably an old monk wearing a cassock, but the cassock worn by this old monk was also woven from gold thread and another kind of red metal thread that Liang Yue didn't recognize under the illumination of the midday sunlight. It even rippled with a psychedelic color. A glance at it was enough to make people unable to look away. In addition, there were also a batch of clothing matching styles that Liang Yue had never seen before. The most familiar one was probably similar to the magician in the film called Sword Rain in his previous life, with strips and rows of cloth hanging all over his body. Looking at it from a distance, it was colorful, like a walking parrot, and the most flamboyant of them had a shiny hairpin on their heads, or a cluster of them, made of various gems, crystals, heavy metals, and precious silks. It also vaguely contained a faint, imperceptible, but undeniable energy reaction. It's too lively, too outrageous, too innovative, too out of place, too. For a while, Liang Yue began to feel that he had walked onto the wrong set. He kept muttering in his heart, "This is obviously a world mainly based on water margin. Okay, where exactly is the problem? Could it be that I have come to not a low-level martial arts world, but a high-level martial arts or immortal world? Or is it that this world is simply a bit too heavily fictionalized?" Everything was pretty normal before. However, after thinking about it, this guy felt that he didn't need to worry too much about these things. Since I'm here, I might as well stay. Anyway, the higher the power level of this public world, the greater the benefits I will receive, right? Chapter 484, Hundreds of Schools of Thought. Perhaps it was due to the unique social atmosphere of the Northern Song dynasty, or perhaps it was because Emperor Rinzong was particularly beloved by the people on the occasion of his birthday. Not only people from the 3 religions and 9 schools like Liang Yue were present, but also many commoners from the capital were allowed to enter the imperial city to celebrate and observe. Therefore, the guards at the gate did not appear too strict when checking the banquet invitations. However, this doesn't mean that the invitation cards in the hands of Liang Yue and the others were useless. Those without this card, even if they were allowed into the imperial city, could only wander and observe on the periphery. Those with invitations could directly go to the inner hall for the banquet and meet the emperor soon. Liang Yue and his group, led by several eunuchs, passed through the gate of the inner courtyard of the imperial city and arrived at a side hall. Although, in terms of their composition, the group of people around him were all considered Jianghu experts, they didn't have much to talk about with each other. Therefore, the process was mostly silent. It was as if there was some kind of insurmountable barrier that naturally existed between them. Of course, not everyone was silent and uncommunicative besides the few people who occasionally ran into acquaintances. Some small circles divided by sect or status would whisper a few words to each other. The origins of these small circles were probably based on the affiliations of the 3 religions and 9 schools since ancient times. The 3 religions naturally referred to Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, the 3 sects with significant influence on the land of China. The 9 schools, generally speaking, referred to the various schools of thought represented by Confucianism, Taoism, Moism, legalism, the school of names, the school of diplomacy, the school of agriculture, the school of logicians, and the school of yin-yang. To be more specific, it seemed that they could be further divided into the upper 9 schools, the middle 9 schools, and the lower 9 schools, which was quite complex and diverse. However, according to the middle-aged man from the Imperial City Division, almost all of those invited to the palace today were Grandmaster-level figures in the Jianghu world. Therefore, the intricacies here were even more confusing. Some schools that clearly belonged to the invited ranks would not necessarily be invited if they didn't have a Grandmaster-level figure within their ranks. Conversely, the same principle applied. Therefore, although Liang Yue looked very young on the outside, in this team, the younger a person was, the more they would be valued and even feared. Thus, imperceptibly, Liang Yue was quietly observed by people because he was too young. No way, a young Grandmaster, huh? Although Liang Yue didn't yet know the standards used to evaluate a Grandmaster, if it was just in terms of cultivation realm, he had some confidence this was his foundation. As long as he had enough martial strength, he could remain calm and collected at any time. However, compared to before he came here, Liang Yue now felt a faint sense of confusion and his heart chaos. It's too damn chaotic. This is completely different from my previous expectations of this public world. Weren't the water margins supposed to be a paradise for heroes? How come the 9 schools of thought have appeared now? Or is it that the world before the Yuan dynasty was like this? Just like that, Liang Yue muttered to himself while following behind several old men who were clearly dressed as Taoist masters, and soon arrived at the venue. This was a very large side hall, but its construction and layout were not as magnificent as the Forbidden City in Beijing compared to the palace of the Ming and Qing emperors, which was almost entirely gilded. This hall initially appeared somewhat plain and simple, but the details were still meticulously crafted and extremely realistic. At a glance, it would make people feel very comfortable and approachable. Anyway, after entering this hall, Liang Yue felt very relaxed and didn't feel any sense of oppression. The eunuch attending to him quickly led him to the corresponding seat according to his invitation card. Unexpectedly, Liang Yue's seat was very close to the front, although it wasn't in the row closest to the aisle in the center of the hall. It was definitely a VIP seat. He didn't know if he was simply benefiting from the Taoist identity or if some people had intentionally arranged it. Some snacks and candied fruits had already been prepared on the table in front of him, and there was even a palace maid standing next to each seat to provide service. It seemed that the current emperor attached great importance to this birthday banquet. Liang Yue and the others were naturally not the first guests to arrive, nor were they the last. Moreover, judging from the layout of the venue, the guests attending today were definitely not limited to the Jianghu people from the 3 religions and 9 schools because, at this moment, the seats where Liang Yue and the others were located were only on the left side of the hall entrance, and there were still a large number of empty seats opposite them. Far from being full on one side of the hall, a team of musicians was playing an ancient melody. The music was simple, but very pleasant to listen to. Even the women who were watching the live broadcast through the village exchange platform were full of praise for it. Unfortunately, probably due to the restraint and aura of the Grandmaster-level figures, even with the music in the hall, the atmosphere didn't seem very lively. Except for those who happened to meet acquaintances in the adjacent seats, most of the people present still seemed somewhat silent and rarely communicated with each other. Most of them closed their eyes to rest or maintained a solemn expression. Only occasionally, under the pretext of drinking water or tea, would people raise their eyes to quietly observe the crowd within their sight. Of course, there were also some who were unrestrained, probably due to differences in their professions or affiliations. As before, perhaps due to his young age, Liang Yue was still one of the focal points of the venue. The reason why he had become one of the focal points was because, in addition to him, There were also some other young grandmasters present at this moment. They were sitting opposite the crowd, that is, they didn't belong to the group of the 3 religions and 9 schools present. Although these people had tender faces, their clothes and appearances were unique and varied. Some seemed to be from families of generals. Even on this occasion, they wore silver armor and a jade inlaid square scarf. With a heroic air, some were dressed in luxurious clothes, with extraordinary bearing, and possessed a rare demeanor at a young age. Some looked like mischievous children, unkempt. Even if their clothes were formal, they could still wear them with a free and unrestrained air. There were also some who, although not very old, were already born with unparalleled beauty, with charm hidden within their bones, as if they were a natural beauty, full of amorous feelings between their glances and eyebrows. In short, they didn't look like simple people. Liang Yue even found someone dressed as a man among them, but no matter what, it was difficult to associate these young people with the word grandmaster, although they might already be very outstanding at their current age. Compared to the group on the side of the 3 religions and 9 schools, whether it was their inner cultivation or the natural aura they exuded, they were much inferior. Chapter 485 The Heavenly King Guards Peace Talisman. About a quarter of an hour or so later, several more groups of guests arrived in the main hall, but still only half of the seats opposite were occupied during this time. The palace maid serving beside Liang Yue also collected the birthday gift he had prepared for the emperor today, and had him personally write the name of the gift on the gift list. It wasn't until an old eunuch slowly walked in from outside the door and announced to everyone, "His Majesty has arrived." A man in a crimson official robe and golden hat, and a woman wearing a phoenix crown and emerald clothes, slowly walked onto the dragon platform under the escort of the crowd. Following him were a group of officials and members of the imperial clan, who finally filled the hall. Everyone stood up and paid their respects. The old emperor, who looked very kind at first glance, very amiably granted them seats and started the banquet, followed by the inevitable opening remarks. During this period, a group of eunuchs and palace maids carried food boxes in batches to various parts of the hall. After the palace maids had served almost all the dishes, the emperor on the dragon throne very perceptibly stopped his meaningless pleasantries, raised his wine glass, and invited all the guests present to drink together. Then, the banquet began. Compared to the slightly cold atmosphere at the table of Liang Yue and the other masters of various sects, the officials on the opposite side were obviously better at creating an atmosphere. Amidst the clinking of glasses and mutual invitations, the hall quickly became lively, with laughter echoing incessantly. During this time, a team of palace dancers were invited to the hall, and under the accompaniment of the musicians, they performed a passionate but elegant dance. After about 3 rounds of wine, the atmosphere in the hall gradually began to rise. On the opposite side, a relatively young official stood up on his own initiative at this time, raised his wine glass, and offered a series of compliments to the emperor on the dragon throne. His words were full of praise for Emperor Inzong of Song, Zhao Zhen's benevolence, and he summarized the official's lifelong achievements and virtues. His flattery made the emperor beam with joy. Just as the atmosphere was intense, this official, who knew how to please, took out a palm-sized, exquisitely crafted wooden box from his arms. Then, he turned the box over in public, revealing a pearl that was at least the size of a ping-pong ball, completely round and flawless, and constantly emitting cold air. "This is a precious item that I obtained from Western region merchants by chance. It is said that this item originated in the far north and was conceived in a 1,000-year-old clam that had become a spirit after the pearl was taken. It was hidden by a strange person in 10,000-year-old cold jade, absorbing the spiritual essence of heaven and earth, and nurtured for 100 years to achieve its current form. If it can be worn on the body at all times, it will calm the mind, purify the ki, and prolong life." Without a doubt, with the official on the opposite side taking the lead, the hall quickly entered a long-lasting discussion of offering treasures and boasting. Obviously, in order to celebrate the late birthday of the Zhao family's emperor, the ministers in the court and the members of the imperial clan who hoped to inherit the throne had put a lot of thought into it. They racked their brains and searched all over the world for various rare and exotic treasures and pearls left behind in the mountains and fields. Some offered 1,000-year-old precious medicinal materials, some offered ancient relics, and some offered famous calligraphy and paintings, antiques, jade stones. There were even those who were curious and specifically found a batch of rare and exotic beasts from some remote mountain corners. Liang Yue heard from a member of the imperial clan that a batch of iron-eating beasts with black and white fur had been found in the bamboo sea and dense forests of the land of abundance for presentation to the emperor for his enjoyment. Of course, such animal gifts could not be brought to the main hall openly, especially since bears like pandas, which had considerable combat abilities, had to be strictly guarded against. In short, The treasure offering ceremony was lively and lasted for more than half an hour before gradually subsiding. And this was only the work of the officials and members of the imperial clan on the opposite side. The young grandmasters hidden among them, and the grandmaster team on Liang Yue's side, had not even opened their mouths yet. I have long heard that there are countless strange people and strange things in this world. On this occasion of universal celebration, the Imperial Palace Hall has gathered all the grandmasters of the Great Song Dynasty. I wonder, do we have the honor today to witness the methods and intentions of all the schools in the world? Sure enough, after the officials and members of the Imperial clan on the opposite side had presented their birthday gifts to Emperor Inzhuang, before they had rested for long, another relatively young busybody stood up. Well, this time the speaker was obviously a member of the Imperial clan dressed in luxurious clothes. Seeing this, the corners of Liang Yue's mouth also unconsciously curved slightly. To be honest, the scenes being played out at the banquet now were like the emperor and his ministers working together to act in a play. However, all of this did not make people feel embarrassed. Being in it, you could also fully feel a certain atmosphere of harmony and concord, although it cannot be said that these were all prearranged scenes. In this hall, a tacit understanding had long been formed between the emperor and his ministers. Of course, to some extent, this was not necessarily a good thing, and when Liang Yue and these people from the folk 3 teachings and 9 streams received the invitation to this royal birthday party, who could really come empty-handed? The palace maid who was originally responsible for serving Liang Yue had quietly gone outside the palace gate at this time through his reincarnation eye, which had been suppressed by the world rules of this public world. Liang Yue could clearly see at this time this palace maid was now holding the wooden box he used to hold the gift in both hands, standing in line outside the palace gate waiting for an order. She would bring the birthday gift into the venue and present it to the old emperor on the dragon throne. Therefore, after receiving the signal from the venue, Liang Yue and the other reclusive sages did not dare to neglect, under the leadership of a grandmaster-level figure from the national religion of the Great Song Dynasty, Taoism. The scene quickly entered another process of birthday congratulations and gift-giving. I, Yangzi, currently reside in the Lushan Taoist temple, and accidentally obtained a piece of 10,000-year-old warm jade. After spending various means, I finally made it into a pair of Heavenly King Guardian amulets, which I now present to your majesty. I wish your majesty good fortune and longevity, happiness and well-being. Following the old Taoist's words, a palace maid also came in at the right time, holding a wooden plate under the encirclement of a piece of cyan silk. A pair of translucent jade pendants exuding a light orange luster were lying quietly on top. They were warm and smooth, without too many patterns or carvings. There were only a few uncommon talisman fonts, which were integrated with a jade talisman and complemented each other. From this pair of jade talismans, Liang Yue could feel a strange energy wave slowly flowing. Obviously, this was not an ordinary jade ornament, but truly a pair of Taoist amulets with some special function. The old emperor and empress Xiao on the dragon throne were obviously also connoisseurs. The two of them seemed very satisfied with a birthday gift sent by the old Taoist, and immediately took one jade talisman each in their hands. Their love for it was overflowing. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 486 Ancient Artifacts. I, a humble Taoist named Ken Songzi, ventured into the desolate wilderness of the far north several months ago and managed to gather a few spiritual zoo fruits. This item is the essence of heaven and earth, containing powerful and extremely yang medicinal properties, making it a rare and valuable treasure for martial artists and key cultivators. Today, I offer it to your majesty, wishing you boundless longevity and widespread blessings. I, a humble Taoist named Wanzi, offer this gift to your majesty for your birthday. Earlier this year, I specially retrieved the collections of my sect's predecessors and started refining pills, spending half a year of effort to finally create a furnace of Yuanling pills. A few days ago today, I bring 5 pills, wishing your majesty boundless longevity. I, a humble Taoist named Yangzi, years ago, I accidentally obtained an ancient Haoyang mirror at the source of the Yellow River. Upon closer inspection, I discovered that this item is actually a divine artifact from the pre-Qin era, possessing the miraculous ability to suppress fortune. Only those who possess the aura of the Son of Heaven can wield it. Today, I am invited to your majesty's birthday celebration, and I hereby present it, wishing your majesty boundless longevity. I, a humble Taoist named Minghizi, before dedicating myself to Taoism, I was born into a craftsman's family and practiced this craft for many years. After entering Taoism, I encountered profound Zuanmen techniques. Over the years, I have devoted myself to research, and now I have gained considerable insights into the art of refining weapons. Today, I specially set up an altar to refine a weapon for your majesty, and finally created a Son of Heaven's sword, wishing your majesty boundless longevity. I, a humble Taoist named Te Sanren, upon hearing of your majesty's birthday, I specially bring a pair of yin-yang fish, spiritual beasts of heaven and earth, wishing your majesty boundless longevity. I, a humble Taoist named Jiazhenzi, to celebrate your majesty's heavenly birthday, I specially bring 10 guangling immortal grasses. I, a humble Taoist named Hechangzi, as the Taoist masters in the front row continuously stood up, bowed, and then recited their concise birthday wishes outside the palace gate. Palace maids, either holding or carrying birthday gifts, began to enter the hall one after another in an instant. Various kinds of dazzling jewels, medicinal fragrances, and exotic beasts began to dominate people's vision. These rare treasures of heaven and earth, Taoist magical artifacts, and even ancient artifacts, which are unattainable in the eyes of ordinary people, are now displayed openly in front of everyone, not to mention the emperor and empress on the dragon platform, the group of court officials and young people opposite them. Even Liang Yue, the self-proclaimed knowledgeable and promising transmigrator, was dazzled for a moment. Non-Lixiang, Jixiang teacher, and others, who were watching the video live through the village platform, were even more enthusiastically instigating him from the sidelines, wanting him to simply take action and snatch them all away. Moreover, after hearing the tempting words of these few spendthrift women, Liang Yue actually had a slight impulse and idea in his heart at a certain moment. This was really embarrassing. Soon as the Taoist masters in front of a certain someone finished presenting their birthday gifts, enjoying the attention and amazement from everyone in the hall, while putting on an aloof and indifferent demeanor of a worldly expert, unintentionally exuding an aura of superiority in the blink of an eye, it was Liang Yue's turn to appear at this moment, only to see this guy slowly get up, unhurriedly brush the non-existent wrinkles on his gorgeous Taoist robe, leisurely salute the emperor and empress not far away, and then speak. I, a humble Taoist named King Guanzi, have heard that my great Song dynasty lacks horses and places to raise and train them. Therefore, I specially present a world map exquisitely embroidered with exotic silkworm silk and a uniform globe. I hope that your majesty can create a new foundation for my great Song dynasty's successors and add blessings to the hundreds of millions of people in my dynasty. I respectfully wish your majesty boundless longevity and eternal grace. Huh? This? World map? Uniform globe? Is it real or fake? How can the world be like this? Takashiro Saya even snorted lightly, expressing her displeasure. I don't know if she was dissatisfied with Liang Yue's stinginess, or felt that the gift he sent out was not valuable enough. In fact, whether a gift is valuable or not is not up to them to decide. Even Liang Yue himself could not easily say. Just look at the reaction of the party receiving the gift, as well as the many ministers and clansmen present, and you will know. After hearing what Liang Yue had sent, Zhao Zhen and Empress Xiao on the dragon chair were greatly shocked. The original kind smile quietly disappeared, and the look of surprise was overflowing immediately afterwards. Without the emperor and empress having to order anything, the great eunuch serving beside them immediately gave an order to take out the gift from the wooden box. The globe was presented on the table of the dragon platform, and the world map was carefully unfolded by 4 young eunuchs from the 4 corners, and carefully set up, diagonally facing the side of the emperor and empress. Is this the world map? But where is my great Song? Where's my great Song? At this time, Emperor Rinzong of Song was full of excitement. In addition to excitement, there was also a hint of panic in his expression. He widened his eyes and tried hard to search for the area he wanted to find on the map. Looking at that appearance, it seemed that he was a little dazzled. However, it's not his fault. In order to avoid some unnecessary troubles, the world map and globe that Liang Yue sent out at this time actually only used colors and exquisite brushwork to depict the outlines, terrains, and mountain ranges of the major continents and oceans. As for the specific countries, texts, and other factors, there was none at all. As for the group of ministers, royal children, and sect masters below, some of them may be knowledgeable and may be able to find some familiar terrains and outlines on the map, but due to the current perspective and related etiquette issues, for a while, they could only scratch their heads and be beyond their reach. In the end, Emperor Rinzong of Song also directly turned his eyes for help to Liang Yue himself, with the support of the great eunuch, could wait to walk down the dragon platform, while reaching out and constantly groping on the map, while constantly and subconsciously swallowing saliva. As for Empress Xiao, it seemed that because of her years of martial arts training, her physical condition looked much better than Zhao Zhen's. She got up nimbly, closely following behind Emperor Rinzong of Song, step by step in the process. She also calmly waved to someone here. When Liang Yue saw this, he didn't dare to neglect, got up and quickly came to the center of the hall, to one side of the map, and then reached out to circle the specific area divisions on the map for the two of them. Your Majesty, Empress, please see, this is the territory of my great song. This is it, but how can it be so small? My great song, please see, Your Majesty, this is the Yellow River, this is the Yangtze River, and the mouth of the Yangtze River is the East China Sea. This sea is the Bohai Sea, which is jointly guarded by Shandong and the Korean Peninsula. This is the legendary North Sea, which was the place where Su Wu herded sheep during the Han Dynasty. Further north, it is a place of pine mountains and forests. This is Mobei, which is the Great Prairie. This is Mount Langjiu, which was the place where Wei Qing and Ho Kuebang built altars to worship the heavens in those years. This is the Qinghai Tibet Plateau, where the mountains are high, the air is thin, and the Tubo people occupy this place. This is the Sichuan Basin, the land of abundance, and this is the Dali Kingdom of Yunnan. This is Hainan Island, also known as Kaiongte, and this is Ryukyu. This is Chapter 487. Luzon. As Liang Yue explained, Emperor Rinzong and Empress Xiao gradually stabilized their emotions. Furthermore, they gradually began to accept the fact that the ancestral land of China and its surrounding areas were only a part of the world, and that the Great Song Dynasty, as the orthodox successor of China, was even smaller and more exquisite. However, compared to the Emperor and Empress, the officials, members of the royal family, and masters from various Jianghu sects sitting in the hall became more curious and even impatient. This was because, when Liang Yue explained and introduced the areas on the map, he not only pointed out some areas within the Great Song Dynasty, it also included surrounding areas, areas separated by the sea, and even more places that many of the people present had never heard of. What made them even more restless was that everyone in the hall could only imagine based on Liang Yue's voice, while all they could see was the back of the map, which was drawn with extraordinary embroidery skills. It felt as if a peerless treasure was right in front of them, but they were constrained by etiquette and could only pretend not to see it at this time. The self-cultivation and patience of the people present were truly tested. If Emperor Rinzong had been attentive, he could have observed the demeanor of the people in the hall while looking at the map and listening to Liang Yue's explanation. Even if he didn't observe all the officials and masters from the Jianghu, it would have been a good opportunity to assess the members of the royal family. However, Zhao Zhen had no such thoughts or intentions at the moment, and he was intently listening to Liang Yue's explanation, his originally somewhat dim eyes occasionally flashing with dazzling brilliance. This place is Luzon Island, which is just across the sea from our Great Song. I suggest that your Majesty must send people to take it down, preferably station troops there, and relocate enough people to live there at this time. Liang Yue pointed to an island on the map across the South China Sea from the Great Song Dynasty and solemnly recommended it. Luzon Island, I know about that. I've heard that it's a hot place with only a few uncivilized natives living on it. I wonder why the Taoist priest would say this. Emperor Rinzong showed a look of surprise on his face, but more of it was anticipation. Firstly, it can alleviate the three redundancies problem of our dynasty to a certain extent, especially the already excessive number of refugees, Xiong soldiers, and even forbidden troops. Former officials of the previous dynasty once said that soldiers should be elite, not numerous, and should be carefully selected one by one. Excessive military strength has become a burden to the court. Although your Majesty can maintain it while in power, it still involves and consumes a lot of the court's efforts, and it will inevitably become a disaster in the future. Secondly, for that newly incorporated overseas territory of the dynasty, your Majesty can alleviate the conflicts caused by land in various places through exchange, trade, fiefdoms, and other methods to ease the land power and reconcile the relationship between farmers and the gentry class. As he spoke, Liang Yue paused, pointed to several specific locations on Luzon Island with his finger, and then continued. Thirdly, this island is not as useless as others say. On the contrary, it contains abundant mineral resources, especially gold and copper mines, which are urgently needed by our Great Song. Such a uniquely endowed place is only occupied by a few indigenous tribes, like a child holding a beautiful jade in a bustling market. For the Great Song, this is a land bestowed by heaven. That island has copper and gold mines. Taoist priest, is this true? After hearing Liang Yue's words, Emperor Rinzong's expression suddenly froze, and then his old face showed ecstasy as a wise ruler who wanted to achieve something during his tenure. Zhao Zhen was naturally well aware of the many hidden dangers within the Great Song dynasty. The former Fan Zhongyan reform was an attempt, but in the end, it had to be abandoned due to infringing on the interests of many people, resulting in excessive resistance from both the court and the people, and ultimately ended in disappointment. In addition, with the increasing oppression of foreign tribes in the north, pointing their spears directly at the dynasty, Emperor Yunzong gradually lost his former vigor. Now, Liang Yue's proposal seemed to give him hope again for those former obstacles to reform and vested interests. This was a means of enticing them with benefits, rather than directly digging meat and power from them. Gold and copper mines were certainly desirable, but the exchange of land and the solution to the problem of refugees and Xiyuang soldiers were even more appealing to him. This compromise solution seemed to suddenly broaden Zhao Zhen's horizons and made him think of many things. I naturally wouldn't dare to speak nonsense in the court. Good. In fact, there are many overseas areas worth developing. These large islands and lands, as long as your majesty can send people to explore them, and then classify and label them according to the natural conditions and land situation of each place. Factors such as resource minerals, etc., can be used for grading, labeling, selling, preferential exchange, and other means, which can solve the contradiction between people and land in China. If tax officials can be sent to station in various places at that time by implementing effective methods, we can further broaden the source of tax revenue for our dynasty. At that time, a wealthy country and a strong army can be expected soon. Good. Cough, your majesty. I wonder what your majesty and Qing Yuanzi Taoist priest were just talking about. Your majesty, I seem to have heard you mention Luzon Island and various overseas places. This matter is of great importance. If your majesty intends to do so, you still need to discuss it carefully with his officials. This matter concerns reform, so it must be treated with caution. Yes, your majesty, it is undeniable. After listening to the conversation between Emperor Yunzong and Liang Yue in the center of the hall, many officials and members of the royal family who had some insight and geographical knowledge had a vague understanding. After that, they became even more impatient, looking eagerly at the back of the map from afar. With their heads held high, having been advised by his officials, Emperor Yunzong suddenly came back to his senses from his reverie. At this time, he turned his head, looked at the hall over the map, and then showed a childlike smile to everyone present. Come and take a look, everyone. I believe you have all heard what Qing Yuanzi Taoist priest and I said just now. It has truly benefited me a lot. Tell me, what are your thoughts? I believe this matter should be discussed later. Now that this hall is holding your majesty's birthday banquet, it can be said that all the wise men have arrived and the masters have gathered. If your majesty really intends to eliminate malpractices, then you need to be more cautious and allow us to carefully deduce and ponder. An elderly man with a stout figure and a dark complexion slowly came behind the emperor and empress, with a large belly, looking at the map in front of him over the dragon case. Although his eyes were also shining brightly, he tried his best to suppress his mood, took a few deep breaths, and then said with some restraint, what Lord Bao said is very true. If that island is really as good as Qing Yuanzi Taoist priest said, then it concerns the rise and fall of the country, and our great song must take it for itself. However, this island will not disappear due to a temporary difference. Before that, your majesty still needs to send generals, craftsmen, and officials to go there early to investigate carefully. At this time, another minister with a slightly reserved expression walked over, staring at the world map in front of him, and said, what Lord Han and Lord Bao said is well considered and patriotic, and it is very much to my liking. Chapter 488 Baozheng. Under the persuasion of several important court officials, Emperor Yunzong finally began to gradually regain his senses, realizing that although this matter seemed to have a bright future and high feasibility, it also required steady progress and must not be rushed at this time. It was the heyday of the Great Song dynasty. Although it had not achieved any significant results in foreign wars, the internal affairs were harmonious, and it could barely be considered a unity of monarch and ministers. Famous ministers, such as Baozheng, Hongqi, and Yang Xiu, who were well known in history, were still serving in the court. Therefore, although Emperor Yunzong's reforms in previous years had failed, the political atmosphere in the court was still relatively harmonious compared with the Huzong era, when the heroes from various factions had completed their debut and were at their peak of activity. The situation was much better, with such a group of people. If Emperor Yunzong at this time really followed the ideas given by Liang Yue and continued to carry out reforms, the chances of success would still be very high. However, even after receiving reminders from the ministers and gradually suppressing the enthusiasm in his heart, Emperor Rinzong was still unable to refocus his attention on his birthday party in a short period of time at this time. He was still staring intently at the map sent by Liang Yue. In fact, it wasn't just him. All the officials, members of the imperial family, and even the masters of various sects on the other side of the hall were all staring at the map hanging behind the dragon platform for a time. Their eyes flickered, and the whole place was silent. Almost everyone was silently observing and even trying to memorize the terrain and landforms on the map. On the contrary, Empress Xiao beside Emperor Rinzong seemed very leisurely at this time, and actually sat back on the phoenix chair, focusing her attention on the globe, which was actually more vivid than the map since it could be taken out by Liang Yue as a birthday gift to the current emperor. The workmanship and materials of this object were naturally beyond doubt from the outside. The main body of this thing was probably 2 circles larger than a basketball. The bronze alloy metal frame, the solid wood carving structure entirely completed by the intelligent Xiao operating a high-precision 3D carving machine, plus high-end piano paint technology. Every gully, every bulge, and the trend of mountains and rivers on it strictly followed the original appearance of the earth. Even compared to similar luxury goods in reality, it was the most cutting-edge product. Huff, breath, huff, breath, huff, breath. Just then, a gradually heavy breathing sound suddenly rang out in the crowd. At first, everyone didn't feel anything was wrong. After all, in an ancient society like the Great Song Dynasty, suddenly seeing a map depicting the accurate terrain and landforms of this world would make everyone feel excited and unable to restrain their emotions. His teeth were chattering, his hands were tightly covering his chest, his back was hunched, and he looked like he was about to fall. Old Bao. What's wrong with you, Brother Zion, beloved minister? Bao Qing, what's wrong with you? Quick! Go and summon the imperial physician. After noticing Bao Zheng's abnormality, Emperor Rinzong and the officials in the hall suddenly fell into chaos. Several eunuchs immediately ran quickly out of the palace when they heard the order. Obviously, facing this sudden change, the courtiers and Zhao Zhen at this time began to become a little at a loss. They had completely forgotten that at this moment, there were still several master-level figures from the medical family sitting in the hall, and Liang Yue was standing aside, very close, so naturally he couldn't stand by and watch. So, with a flip of his sleeve, a piece of bright purple glow suddenly shot out from his palm, directly enveloping Bao Zheng, who was surrounded by the crowd, and slowly lifted him off the ground. At this time, the originally chaotic crowd suddenly quieted down, and after realizing that Liang Yue was taking action, they immediately took a few steps back. Emperor Rinzong originally wanted to get closer, but was stopped by the chief eunuch beside him with an agile dodge, so he could only look at Liang Yue with concern and sincerely asked, "May I ask Taoist Qing Yuanzi, what's wrong with Bao Qing? Preliminary judgment, it should be a complication caused by excessive oil and fat in the blood vessels, leading to blockage of the heart meridians." After Liang Yue wrapped Bao Zheng in front of him, almost in the next moment, he had already discerned the problem with the other party's body, and then helped to dredge it with his wood-based spiritual power. It only took a few breaths before the hidden dangers in the other party's heart organs were removed. However, this was obviously a temporary solution. If the imbalance in this Lord Bao's body could not be resolved, the heart problem would return sooner or later. After temporarily resolving the other party's condition, Liang Yue withdrew his spiritual power and dropped the other party to the ground, and Bao Zheng at this time, after his treatment, instantly returned to normal. The originally distorted irrelevance due to pain also turned into a refreshed look. Looking at that expression, it was like the performance after a week of old constipation suddenly became smooth. Upon seeing this, the surrounding people were immediately filled with surprise and amazement. The masters in the back were fine. They were all very proficient in internal strength cultivation. Although they may not have reached Liang Yue's realm, they all had their own strengths and reached a considerable level, especially those masters from the Taoist and medical families. It was not surprising to heal and remove diseases with internal strength cultivation, but for Emperor Rinzong at this time, and the officials and members of the imperial family in the hall, it was another matter, especially since the Great Song Dynasty court and field had a tacit understanding of suppressing martial arts and valuing literature. There were few people in the court who practiced long-term comfortable life made them mostly look big-bellied and lazy. Some people, under the call of a certain belief, no longer believed that there were things like ki cultivation and internal cultivation in this world. Now, Liang Yue had easily cured Bao Zheng's illness, which was definitely amazing to them. "May I ask, Taoist, what you said before, the excessive oil and fat in my, blood vessels, leading to blockage of the heart meridians, what exactly is going on?" Bao Zheng took a few deep breaths at this time, and after feeling that he was completely fine, he quickly tidied up his clothes, bowed to Liang Yue to thank him, and then asked with concern. Simply put, Lord Bao's body is too obese, so that his own oil and fat are too much, invading the blood, causing poor blood circulation, and the surge of human blood depends entirely on the operation of the heart meridians. Over the years, the accumulation of oil and fat has blocked the heart meridians, so there's this disaster I see. Then has the disease on my body been removed by the Taoist? The blockage in the heart has indeed been cleared, but the disease on Lord Bao's body lies in excessive obesity, so if you want to get rid of the root cause, you still need to start from this aspect. According to the Taoist, being overweight is really harmful, not small. At this time, a member of the imperial family who was also broad-minded and fat asked in the crowd, with a bit of eagerness in his expression, "That's natural. The human body is actually a complex world, and any change will cause corresponding feedback. To put it more simply, excessive weight will cause a heavy burden on the body, for example, directly compressing bones, nerves, blood vessels, 5 internal organs, etc., and then causing various diseases. At first, it may only be some minor diseases, but over time, upon hearing this, Liang Yue looked at the concerned eyes around him, and then popularized some medical knowledge and attempts for them. For a time, the many graceful dignitaries present were all pale and full of worry. "Then may I ask, Taoist, how to eliminate this hidden danger?" Emperor Rinzong secretly glanced around with some complacency at this time, and was fortunate for the first time in his life for his thin body. However, in addition to rejoicing, the emperor did not forget to find a solution for his ministers and clan. This is also simple. In the usual meals, add more vegetables and fruits, appropriately reduce the intake of meat and oil, pay attention to a balanced diet, and eat less sweets, and usually pay more attention to exercise. Is enough, Liang Yue replied with a smile when he heard this. "It's so simple. The way to maintain health and prolong life is the strength of our Taoist family. If your majesty is interested, you can postpone the time of the morning court by half an hour, and take the ministers in the court to pick a spacious place in the palace after a planned exercise. I believe that under the guidance of experts, there will be obvious results in 1 or 2 months. Well, in order to maintain the health of all the Qing family, and for the sake of the Jiangshan Shiji of my great Song dynasty, I would like to ask Taoist and all the masters to teach me in the future." Chapter 489, Izo Island. A little over a quarter of an hour passed before the main hall began to return to its normal rhythm. The Emperor and Empress Xiao had already returned to their dragon thrones, wearing somewhat distracted, formulaic smiles as they watched the grandmasters below present their various treasures as birthday gifts. Although these birthday gifts were rare and precious, the minds of the Emperor and Empress were clearly not on these things at the moment. From time to time, they would glance at the globe placed on the dragon desk in front of them. In fact, most of the senior officials, the imperial family, the relatives of the Empress, and even the grandmasters of the Jiang who were the same, most of their attention had been drawn to the world map hanging behind the Emperor and Empress. And they would occasionally exchange a few words about it. Only Liang Yue, as the instigator, and the women who were watching the live broadcast through the village platform, were surprised and amazed by the treasures that were being sent to the main hall. After browsing through the birthday gifts from the various ex and grandmasters, the one that Liang Yue valued the most was not a rare treasure or a protective magic weapon, but a mechanical pulley-style crossbow. It looked very much like the optimized designs for ancient cold weapons in modern society, based on the principles of physics, structure, and mechanics. It could be said that, apart from the manufacturing materials, this crossbow was almost as good as modern works. From the outside, this crossbow was streamlined, like a swift spreading its wings. The crossbow was about 1.23 meters long, with an effective range of 400 meters, but the draw weight was greatly reduced due to the pulley system. If such equipment could be mass-produced and equipped into the army of the Great Song dynasty, and used for large-scale saturation fire, it would definitely be a heavy weapon on the battlefield. This item was the work of a Maoist Grandmaster Emperor Rinzong of Song, as the recipient was obviously not a military idiot. After seeing this crossbow, he couldn't wait to bring a group of guests from the main hall outside the palace gate. After 2 guards operated it for a while, he personally took it up and shot 3 arrows at the target in the distance. In the end, Rinzong even indulged himself in the thrill of drawing the string with a pulley. Zhao Zhen, who was already entering the later stages of his life, relied on his thin body and arms that were almost never exercised, but he still managed to successfully draw the strong crossbow in his hand. After personally assessing the weight of this birthday gift, Emperor Rinzong was naturally very satisfied, and almost immediately dispatched craftsmen from the court to set up a separate department to be responsible for studying the mass production of this equipment. The senior officials in the court had no objection to this, and cooperated to the best of their ability. As soon as they received the decree, Liang Yue, who was not far away, saw all of this and immediately felt that this generation of emperors and courtiers was indeed good. It seemed that the humiliation of the Chinese alliance and the tuition fees of the annual tribute were not paid in vain, at least on the surface. No one was making trouble. About 2 hours later, Emperor Rinzong's birthday banquet finally came to an end. The guests in the main hall began to leave one after another. But Liang Yue was led aside by the chief eunuch beside Rinzong, and then entered a side hall similar to the royal study. At this moment, Emperor Rinzong of Song, Zhao Zhen, and several important officials from the main hall, Hong Qi, Bao Zheng, Fu Bi, and others, were already waiting here. The world map and the globe that had been hanging in the main hall were also moved here. Obviously, there must be something important to discuss with Liang Yue when he was summoned alone at this time. It's been hard on Qing Yuanzi Taoist priest to come here alone. The gift that Taoist priest has given is really too shocking, so that I am still a little fluttery and restless. Ha 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 ha. Emperor Rinzong seemed very polite at this time, and personally walked a few steps to welcome him in. After greeting everyone present, Liang Yue sat down peacefully. There were too many people in the main hall today, and some things are indeed not suitable to be said openly. Your Majesty, please feel free to order. Previously, what Taoist priest said about immigrating overseas was quite touching to us, but what we are most concerned about now is the horse breeding land that Taoist priest mentioned at the beginning. May I ask, Taoist priest, in the areas surrounding our great Song dynasty, besides the northern barbarians, what other places are suitable for raising horses? After taking his seat, Bao Zheng, Lord Bao, was the first to speak. After experiencing a life and death disaster, this black-faced old man now seemed very open-minded. When it came to business, he almost immediately entered a working state in the immediate vicinity. The most suitable place for our great Song dynasty to raise horses is in Japan. As he spoke, Liang Yue got up and gently pointed to the world map spread out on the table, pointing his finger at the northernmost of the 4 islands of Japan. This place is called Izo Island. Although it is close to Japan, it is regarded as a barbaric land by their country and has not been under its jurisdiction for a long time. The climate is cold, and there are indigenous people living on the island. However, the terrain is relatively flat and suitable for raising horses. With the strength of our dynasty's maritime transport ships, if a batch of fine horse breeds can be moved in and sufficient horse grass is sown, the lack of horses in our great Song dynasty can be improved in one fell swoop within 5 years. This Izo Island, of course, is Hokkaido in Japan. This island of Japan is actually suitable for raising horses? I have never looked at it before. When Emperor Rinzong heard this, his eyes lit up, and he looked surprised, and his whole person bent down and looked at the small island on the map. Afterwards, he became more and more satisfied, with a greedy look on his face. In fact, in my opinion, the one further north of this island seems to be good too. It is located at the mouth of a large river and is very close to the land where the Liao kingdom is located. If it can be taken for oneself without anyone knowing, and secretly send generals to station and train there, at a critical moment, it will definitely be able to give the Liao people a hard blow from behind. Hong Qi, the Prime Minister Han, who had experience in leading military teams and fighting defeats, also had a look of wisdom in his eyes at this time, bending over and pointing to a large island north of Izo Island. Looking at that momentum, it has a bit of the style of vertical and horizontal. Swallowing the world. This matter, what does Qing Yuanzi Taoist priest think? When Rinzong heard this, he also felt that it made sense, but in the end he still looked at Liang Yue. This island is called Sakhalin Island. Its southern part is mostly mountainous, with dense forests, while the northern part is mainly hilly and mountainous, with relatively gentle terrain. It itself contains mineral resources, and the fishery resources are also very rich. However, only some uncivilized natives live on the island. If a military force can be sent to station there, even if it occasionally needs to be transported some materials and food from the country, it is estimated that it will not cost much money. Liang Yue ultimately gave a positive evaluation of the ideas of this monarch and his ministers. After all, Sakhalin Island is indeed a treasure land. In addition to its strategic location, it also produces oil, coal, and gold. In addition, the terrain on the island is generally undulating, not flat, which is not conducive to cavalry operations, which limits the Liao people's combat capabilities. But if it is only used as a garrison island and a naval base, it can threaten the rear of the Liao regime to a considerable extent. And it's decided like this. Order the maritime shipyard to speed up the construction of warships, and various transport ships must also keep up. Order the Maoists and Gongshis to intensify the research and development of stronger naval warships. Chapter 490 Galloping. In the time that followed, Rinzong and his ministers engaged in further detailed discussions regarding the issues of overseas garrisons and horse breeding. During this process, Liang Yue also offered some of his own suggestions. For example, the islands of Izo and Sakhalin were relatively far from the Great Song dynasty. While the sailors might be fine during the voyage, transporting horses would inevitably lead to many losses and errors. To prevent such risks, it would be best to find several midway supply stations along the transportation route for repairs and adjustments. Therefore, finding a few safe islands along the sea route became very necessary. In short, after a series of meetings, it wasn't until the sky outside the hall had completely darkened that they concluded. To this end, Emperor Rinzong specially kept the ministers and Liang Yue present for a simple meal before dismissing them. So, Rinzong waved his hand generously on the spot, not only giving him that batch of pandas but also bestowing upon him a pair of exotic yin-yang fish, which had been sent by another Taoist master. In addition, after learning that Liang Yue was going to establish his own sect in the southeastern outskirts of Bianlian, Zhao Zhen also allocated a piece of native mountainous land around the sect to him. It's just that there weren't any famous mountains or rivers around Bianlian. If it were another place, such as Chang'an or Luoyang, this emperor would probably have been even more generous. In addition to a piece of land and 2 kinds of exotic beasts, Emperor Rinzong also gave Liang Yue a gold medal before he left. This was said to be a kind of certificate that would allow him to walk freely in the palace. Just like that, after leaving the palace, Liang Yue headed directly in the direction of his home, walking slowly and leisurely. As a result, as soon as he had just crossed a large bridge and arrived at a night market, trouble came looking for him. Clatter, clatter, clatter on the bustling street. Pedestrians were flowing endlessly, almost reaching the point of people squeezing against each other, and the sounds of street vendors hawking their wares could be heard everywhere on both sides of the road. It was in this situation that a burst of rapid hoofbeats suddenly approached from afar, galloping quickly from one end of the street, charging straight ahead, completely disregarding the pedestrians in the middle, wherever it passed. There was a scene of people and horses falling over and scattering in all directions. For a time, there were shouts, curses, screams, and the wails of pedestrians who were hit or knocked away because they couldn't dodge in time. Finally, the horse and the cavalryman on its back awakened everyone on the road, who subconsciously dodged to both sides of the street. Liang Yue happened to be on the edge of this pedestrian passage. The chaotic crowd was unable to carry his figure and move him aside at this moment. He was like a boulder in the surging torrent, remaining unmoved no matter how the water flowed. Therefore, when the crowd dodged away, it left Liang Yue alone in the passageway, and the person who dared to gallop wildly on horseback in the bustling streets of Bianlian, the capital of the Great Song dynasty, was precisely aiming for this effect. Liang Yue was well aware of this. Although the streets were crowded at this time, his clothing was so eye-catching that it was still conspicuous even in the crowd. In fact, Liang Yue had already clearly noticed some gazes from the shadows not long after he stepped out of the palace gate. Having reached his current state of cultivation, Liang Yue could roughly capture the malice of others towards him, and even the other party's approximate thoughts. The greater the difference in cultivation realm between others and Liang Yue, the easier it was for him to understand what they were thinking. The cavalryman in front of him was naturally no exception. The reason why the other party was galloping wildly on horseback in the bustling street was to find trouble for him. Looking at the figure rushing towards him, Liang Yue could clearly capture a trace of killing intent in his heart. The other party's rough face, covered with a thick beard, was now filled with a grim smile in excitement. After approaching within 10 meters of Liang Yue, the burly man immediately bent his knees and curved one leg backward, looking ready to exert force at any time. It seemed that if Liang Yue's judgment was correct, this person intended to use the momentum of the horse's galloping, coupled with the explosive force of his legs when passing by him. He would kick him in the neck. For an experienced veteran of the battlefield, such tactics were not uncommon. It was just a pity that the person he encountered was Liang Yue. After a short whinny, the tall horse under the cavalryman suddenly seemed to have been frightened abnormally. Its forehooves straightened instantly, and its entire body leaned backward, but its body still began to skid forward with the previous inertia. The cavalryman on the horse's back was even more frightened by the sudden change and flew forward. However, what was more troublesome was that one of the cavalryman's feet was still firmly entangled in the stirrup, so he was pulled back by the abruptly stopped horse at the moment of flying out. At that time, it could be seen that the man was so frightened by the sudden pull that he lost his composure. In a dizzying moment, he completely failed to grasp his balance. Finally, he crashed headfirst into the compacted earth surface. Subsequently, the surrounding pedestrians only heard a slight crack sound, and the other party's thick neck was instantly twisted into a 170 or 80-degree shape, his face full of purplish color by the time the surrounding crowd reacted and checked from a distance of 2 or 3 meters away. The cavalryman was already silent. During the whole process, Liang Yue never looked askance, as if the whole thing had never happened, and still moved forward calmly and slowly. After a while, a team of constables arrived at the scene in time, and after understanding the situation from the surrounding pedestrians and vendors, they reported the matter to their superiors. It was understood that the person who had been galloping wildly on horseback in the night market was a member of the Liao Kingdom's garrison in Bianliang City, which, in modern terms, could barely be considered a diplomatic worker. As a result, the incident alarmed Emperor Rinzong Zhaozhen. The next day, after understanding the specific details of the incident, Rinzong immediately ordered the eunuchs under his command to go to the Liao Kingdom's embassy to scold the other party's diplomatic envoys, demanding that they manage their own people and not commit such offenses again, and so on. In short, the matter was eventually dropped. Chapter 491 Expected Trouble. Needless to say, someone like Liang Yue, who had only arrived in the Great Song Dynasty and this public world a few days ago, and hadn't even familiarized himself with the surrounding terrain and customs, was suddenly assassinated. The reason for this must be that he had offended someone. Considering the appearance and attire of the previous cavalryman, Liang Yue could guess the other party's identity without any investigation. As for the specific root cause of the assassination, it must have stemmed from the 2 birthday gifts he presented to Emperor Rinzong at that time. There were many people in the hall, so many Jianghu grandmasters, ministers, dignitaries, imperial clansmen, eunuchs, and palace maids were present. Such important things as the world map and the globe would inevitably become the focus of discussion as official personnel of the northern foreign race stationed in the capital of the Great Song Dynasty. Just like those foreign consulates in later generations, they naturally had their own set of intelligence gathering systems. Someone like Liang Yue, although he hadn't appeared for long, was a relatively conspicuous important person whose entry into their field of vision was within expectations. It's just that they shouldn't have provoked Liang Yue. As the saying goes, reciprocity is essential. Since you can come and assassinate me once, then I, on my side, naturally have to respond. Of course, one of the reasons for this was that the women's love and compassion were overflowing, and they couldn't bear to see young and orphan children. But in addition to this, the fact that Liang Yue's sect was about to be built, and that he needed to recruit manpower and select disciples with clean backgrounds, was also very important. Now, Liang Yue's founding of a sect has been officially recognized by the government. Because of the previous birthday gift, Song Rinzong also specially allocated a piece of land to him. Although it was not a famous mountain or great river, and upon careful investigation, it could even be regarded as an undeveloped land of poor mountains and bad waters in this era. But who wouldn't love something free? A large area of virgin forest and mountainous area not too far from Bianliang City was just right for him to use as a place to build his mountain gate. After telling the few women in the family about this matter, teacher Jingxiang, Xia Ozio, and others immediately had new ideas. And it seemed that they were planning to start the second phase of the mountain gate expansion design and planning in advance. Liang Yue naturally had no objections to this. I'm going out tonight. You guys pay more attention at home. There may be some people with impure intentions who come to make trouble. The man who decided to respond to the previous assassination naturally had to prepare some backup plans before leaving. Although, for the women, the so-called experts in this world may not be so difficult to deal with, it is better to be careful. The real world is not as simple as going to a dungeon to kill monsters. If it's just a head-on confrontation, that's fine, but the fear is that some people will use insidious tricks in the dark, taking unorthodox paths. Today, forces like the 100 schools of thought have already appeared in the Imperial City Hall. It can be imagined that, in addition to those superficially glamorous Grandmaster sects, there may be even more Jianghu schools that cannot be on the stage. And the precious thing about a world map that marks the terrain and landforms of the entire Earth is that it can broaden people's knowledge and vision. It helps people to better and faster understand and develop this world. For those who are determined to make their own sect, power, or even country bigger and stronger, it is almost an irresistible temptation. Therefore, the people who want to get their hands on these things are definitely not just the Liao people. Now, there's only one known world map in the world. Today, Liang Yue has given it to Song Rinzong as a birthday gift, and the difficulty of getting such an important thing out of the imperial palace is conceivable in comparison. Starting with Liang Yue seems to be the easier side. Moreover, things like maps, as long as you can get one, means you can copy countless copies, which is almost a cost-free business for such good things. Some insightful people, ambitious forces, sects, schools, local gentry, clans, powerful people, celebrities, scholars, businessmen, researchers, officials, crew members, and even various departments under the government, etc. Wouldn't they be tempted, to put it bluntly, as long as they have a little capital and knowledge, if conditions permit? They will definitely purchase such a world map for themselves, whether it is simply used as a collection, or it can really be put into practice. It is an excellent choice. One for each person is the real ideal state. Therefore, Liang Yue and his family members will inevitably become a sweet pastry in the eyes of others in the near future. Once they fail to show the strength that matches the grandmaster celebrities that people expect, they will immediately become the target of some people's attack and seizure. And even if Liang Yue's family has some strength, so that some people in the dark cannot succeed with unorthodox means, on the surface, there are still countless tricks and strategies waiting for them. In short, a gentleman can be deceived by means. Conspiracy and machination are just means. In the eyes of some people, there is no distinction between high and low. As long as the goal can be achieved, everything can be used. Liang Yue had not considered this beforehand. The reason why he can still make the decision to present the world map to Song Rinzong as a birthday gift under this situation, on the one hand, it naturally stems from his love for this land, and he can't bear to see such a brilliant civilization country move towards its end step by step. On the other hand, he is deliberately doing it. Simply put, he wants to create a more pressing external environment to add a little pressure to his life. This is not a simple monster fighting upgrade, but it can also achieve the purpose of tempering in an invisible way. Of course, the premise of all this is that Liang Yue not only has the willingness to send out that map, but also has the ability to directly overturn the table and smash the pot. What are you going out to do? Takagi Saya asked curiously, and everyone else turned to look at him. Go north and take a look. Speaking, Liang Yue introduced the horse riding incident that happened on the downtown street to the women, so the purpose of his outing was self-evident. I want to go too. Nana heard this and immediately leaned over, her big eyes full of expectation. You guys should stay at home. After all, I'm going to kill people this time. And you mainly cultivate your mind and body, and there are so many children to take care of at home. Liang Yue reached out and stroked Nana's head at this time. After saying that, and after instructing everyone a few more words, Liang Yue gently leaped, wrapping himself in a ball of purple light, and instantly turned into rainbow light. The whole person was like a shooting star, flying quickly towards the north. Chapter 492 The Golden Light Mantra. Although Liang Yue's bloodline power in this world was suppressed, preventing him from using his gravity manipulation abilities to further accelerate his flight, even relying solely on his foundation establishment stage cultivation and realm, his current flying speed was still very fast. In less than half an hour, Liang Yue had already arrived at the Liaoning Upper Capital, Linhuang Prefecture, located in the North China Plain. Location-wise, it was roughly the Chifeng area of later generations in Inner Mongolia. Liang Yue's purpose in coming here was simple: to break into the imperial palace of the Great Liao, spar with the experts of the Liao Kingdom, and then kill a few people along the way. Not too many. And not to the extent of slaughtering thousands of troops like he did in the Shaolin 5 Ancestors and Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber worlds. It hadn't reached that point yet. Currently, the Water Margin Heroes storyline hadn't even begun, so Liang Yue only needed to appropriately deter the other side. After making up his mind, Liang Yue, high in the sky, suddenly shifted his spiritual power, and the wood spiritual power, originally misty like clouds and haze, suddenly became solid thickly, like a layer of bright purple diaphragm. It enveloped his entire body. Outside this film, the purple light danced wildly, setting him off like a god high above. This was an energy application method that Liang Yue had comprehended from the Golden Bell Shield. He had obtained a fragment of this divine skill in the new Shaolin 5 Ancestors world, and although he had initially given up on practicing it to the end, he later obtained the complete Golden Bell Shield manual in the Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber world. But at that time, he had already successfully advanced to the innate realm in cultivation, and his main cultivation method had already been determined, so it was naturally impossible to discard it and recultivate this Buddhist divine skill. But if you were to give up on it completely, it would be too much of a pity. Therefore, he could only use the Taoist innate purple haze inner strength to transform the Golden Bell Shield divine skill, turning it into his own. Later, Liang Yue was fortunate enough to obtain the Everlasting Spring skill, a cultivation technique. In addition to the main internal energy cultivation, several basic Taoist secret techniques were attached to the end of this skill. The Golden Light Charm was one of them. This was a basic Taoist spell that could gather the metallic elements between heaven and earth to form a protective defense. As the name suggests, the Golden Light Charm should originally appear as a golden circular. Later, after being digested and mastered by Liang Yue, and integrated into his own cultivation method, it was also affected by the spiritual power under his own skill fusion, and thus transformed into the current bright purple. In addition to being superior in defense, it was also more flexible and versatile to use and control. Among them, naturally, there was the blessing and operational thinking of the Golden Bell Shield divine skill. Back to the main topic. The reason why Liang Yue would preemptively put a cover on himself before entering Shenjing City was naturally for safety. After seeing the composition of the various forces in this world, as well as the strength of the so-called Grandmasters, Liang Yue felt that he had indeed underestimated the heroes of the world if the land of the Great Song was already like this, not to mention the Liao Kingdom, which was even more powerful in military strength at present. In Shenjing City, the capital of a country, in addition to the experts, there might also be some defense-breaking weapons specifically used to target martial artists and cultivators, whether it was armor-breaking in terms of physics or dispelling true energy in terms of energy. It was worth his serious attention. After the golden light charm was completely digested and integrated into himself, Liang Yue's understanding of this spell had already exceeded the original basic Taoist magic method. Simply put, although the golden light charm was an energy application method, it gathered the metallic elements between heaven and earth, and had already involved the level of transforming from virtuality to reality. It was not as simple as a pure energy spell or physical defense. To be precise, it should be a combination of both. It can defend against everything, of course. Even without this golden light charm, Liang Yue was confident that he could establish his prestige and remain unscathed without wearing a shield. But people, sometimes, have to put on a show. They can't just fight and leave. The typhoon and image must be established first. Moreover, the character must be eye-catching. Glancing at Linhuan Prefecture below, which had begun to gradually turn dark and enter the curfew stage, Liang Yue looked up and, without spending much time, determined the location of the Liao Kingdom's imperial palace. With a thought, the whole person once again turned into purple rainbow, drawing a beautiful arc in the air, and quickly landed in an open space in the imperial city. According to the normal years, the Liao Kingdom should have entered the reign of Yelu Hongji. At this time during his reign, this Liao Kingdom emperor experienced several disturbances. He successively encountered the Chang'an rebellion, Yelu Yixin's usurpation of power and misgovernment, mistakenly killed the empress, placed his crown prince under house arrest, and indulged in extravagance, building Buddhist temples and monasteries extensively, wasting national power, and leading to political decay, causing the entire country to turn from prosperity to decline. But if you only look at some of his measures in the early part of his reign, he can be regarded as having achieved something. Especially in terms of his attitude towards the Great Song, his existence was actually relatively peaceful from this point of view. Yelu Hongji's life experience is somewhat similar to that of Emperor Xuanzong of Tang, but it's only similar. From the perspective of influence and other aspects, the two of course cannot be equated at this time. Yelu Hongji had only been on the throne for a few years, and it was the time when he was working hard to govern, then extensively building Buddhist temples, and hunting and playing everywhere. He was in the initial stage of wasting national power. Therefore, Liang Yue certainly couldn't attack them too hard at this stage. That would be provoking hatred for the Song dynasty and setting up a target for the Liao Kingdom. He didn't want to reverse the situation of national confrontation in the world alone, like in the previous Shaolin 5 Ancestors and Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber worlds. Therefore, the scale of this revenge had to be controlled. Amitabha, benefactor, may I ask why you have trespassed into my Liao Kingdom's royal palace? Liang Yue had just landed not long ago, probably only 3 to 5 seconds, when he heard a Buddhist chant and a questioning voice in his ear. Faintly, chaotic footsteps began to appear all around. Earlier tonight, in the downtown area of Bianliang City, this poor Taoist was assassinated by Liao cavalrymen. Now I have come here specifically to ask you for an explanation. Looking around at the 3 old monks around him, the corners of Liang Yue's mouth curved slightly. Liang Yue didn't find anything surprising about them being able to discover his whereabouts. Nonsense. He was now like a human-shaped light bulb, surrounded by purple light, and the surrounding 30 to 40 meters were illuminated to a translucent state. Such a big target falling from the sky, it would be a ghost if they couldn't find it. In short, Liang Yue did it on purpose. May I ask, Taoist priest, how do you want to seek an explanation? After hearing his words, the old monk on the opposite side's expression remained unchanged, and after pondering for a moment, he asked him, this poor Taoist has heard that the Liao Kingdom has countless capable people. I think there should be a gathering of experts in this imperial palace. Call them all out and let me kill a few people. When the anger in my heart dissipates, it will be over. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 493 Golden Big Sword. This time, Liang Yue came to establish his authority, so naturally, he wouldn't be polite to them when speaking, of course, having long been accustomed to the Han people's gentleness, courtesy, frugality, and humility, and used to being flattered. Some people naturally couldn't stand Liang Yue's somewhat domineering words. The three old monks were fine, having meditated for many years, their minds were relatively stable and unmoved. As for the others, how dare you? You little demon dares to speak so arrogantly. Prepare to die, you? The next moment, a roar suddenly came from the other side of the palace wall, followed by a bloody figure rising high into the air, drawing a smooth parabola. Upon closer inspection, it was a burly man wearing half a suit of ancient bronze armor, with one shoulder exposed, and wielding a double-edged axe. At this moment, his hair and beard were all raised, his face filled with rage in his agitation. Even from 180 meters away, he had already raised the axe high, bringing the force of 1,000 pounds as he fiercely struck towards Liang Yue. The speed, not slow, don't be reckless. At this time, the old monk on the opposite side saw the burly man's posture, his expression changed drastically. And he reminded him aloud. Liang Yue, on the other hand, only glanced faintly at the other party's seemingly desperate stance, and then raised his sleeve. In an instant, 9 golden, substantial-like sword lights appeared out of thin air around the burly man. Not good. Seeing this, the three old monks' expressions changed drastically, and they hurriedly used a tactic of besiege way to rescue Zhao, as if they were telepathically connected, and attacked Liang Yue in the middle together. One of the three used a palm, one used a fist, and the other held a large vajra. For a time, the momentum was compelling, and the energy was surging. It was clear that these were not simple methods. Unfortunately, although the three of them attacked with considerable skill, they underestimated Liang Yue. The sword lights in the air, at the moment of their appearance, directly struck out without any fancy move. Some swept horizontally, some chopped down, some stabbed straight, some shuttled, some spiraled. The 9 golden swords' moves were simple and unadorned, each different, but all aimed at the vital points around the person in mid-air. At this moment, the burly man obviously realized something was wrong, so he hurriedly changed his moves. The axe that had originally gathered momentum from 180 meters away suddenly stagnated, and then he twisted his waist and spun around, wildly chopping at the golden swords around him. At the same time, the bloody halo surrounding his body suddenly flared up. The posture was like a candle burning all its light in an instant, with a desperate air. Unfortunately, all the burly man's responses were in vain. The golden sword, condensed from sword light, was far more solid than he imagined. The sharpness and stability of its moves blocked the axe at the moment of contacting, accompanied by a clear and thought-provoking collision sound. The burly man's arms were immediately forced open, he leaned back, and almost couldn't hold the axe in his hand immediately afterwards. The other 8 golden swords pierced through the man's body from top to bottom. Puff, accompanied by a muffled sound, the burly man instantly exploded into a cloud of blood mist. At the same time, the 3 old monks who were blocking Liang Yue's attack directly missed. Liang Yue dodged all the attacks with a backward step, and the monk holding the vajra was directly knocked away by a simple iron shoulder accompanied by a crackling sound of broken bones. He began to vomit blood violently while still falling, and his robes were torn in various places, with strands of blood constantly seeping out after falling. The old monk seemed to want to prop himself up, his face full of purplish color and disbelief, but in the end, he directly planted his head on the ground. The next moment, he was completely out of breath. Amitabha, in just one exchange, 2 masters directly exploded and died. This sudden change made the remaining 2 old monks change their expressions greatly, and they hurriedly joined together, standing opposite Liang Yue. Their faces were filled with sorrow, and the Buddhist chants in their mouths unconsciously carried a bit of sigh. I haven't even drawn my weapon yet, and 2 have already fallen. Are there any more experts? If it's just this much, then I'm too disappointed. Looking at the 2 old monks opposite him, Liang Yue was suddenly a little bored, and reached out to gently beckon, and the vajra that had fallen on the ground immediately fell into his hand. Looking at this weapon, which was bronze in color and engraved with a 3-headed Buddhist demon, he squeezed it hard, but only left a shallow handprint on it afterwards. The handprints began to show a tendency to rebound and recover. This kind of material and strength immediately surprised Liang Yue, so this guy put it away, intending to take it back as spoils of war. Release the arrows. After all, this was the imperial palace. Just as Liang Yue and the 2 old monks were confronting each other and distracted, teams of imperial guards had quickly climbed onto the roofs and walls, assembled, and surrounded them from 180 meters away immediately afterwards. Under the command of a general wearing fur armor, hundreds of arrows instantly covered them, the target naturally being Liang Yue, the humanoid light bulb surrounded by purple light swish accompanied by a gray shadow. A large number of arrows came from all directions with a strong sound of piercing through the air in the blink of an eye. They had already invaded the area 40 to 50 meters around Liang Yue at this time. Liang Yue stretched out his palm, and in an instant, an invisible suction force seemed to generate out of thin air, rotating rapidly around himself as the center guiding technique plus Kyankan great shift. For a time, the air around Liang Yue seemed to become viscous, like a large insect catching net. Those arrows that seemed to have great force, after entering this area, were wrapped in it with just one contact, as if dancing after a period of rotation and adjustment. The arrows that had come from all directions were so lightly and neatly arranged at Liang Yue's feet. This scene immediately plunged the field into deathly silence. This is Wolf Tooth, barbed arrow, pulling out an arrow from a large bundle of arrows. Liang Yue muttered in a somewhat ambiguous voice after carefully identifying the shape of the arrowhead. Then, with a gentle flick of his finger, the arrow instantly turned into gray, sharp light, and in the blink of an eye, it had pierced through the previous Imperial Guard general, leaving a bowl-sized hole in his chest immediately afterwards. The arrow's force did not diminish, and it continued to strike straight at the soldiers behind with irresistible force in the process. 3 unlucky guys were pierced through by this one arrow until the end. The arrow even directly punched a bowl-sized, 20 or 30 centimeter deep hole in the thick palace wall, before turning into a cloud of tiny debris due to the limitations of its own material. However, this was not over yet. Immediately afterwards, Liang Yue reached out and pulled out another arrowhead with a blood groove. Don't recognize it. After saying that, he flicked his finger again, and the arrow was shot out in an instant, piercing through the Imperial Guard team on the other side, directly taking away 5 soldiers. Seeing this, the surrounding Imperial Guards faintly began to stir after losing their commanding general. Some of the guards couldn't restrain themselves and once again drew their bows and arrows, shooting at this side on their own initiative, but without exception, they were all captured by the invisible viscous force around someone, and finally limply arranged at his feet. Afterwards, Liang Yue once again took action, taking out the third seemingly ordinary arrow from the pile of arrows, and spinning it flexibly between his fingers. This one looks ordinary, but it's coated with poison. Chapter 494. I think people-oriented. Amitabha. As a Grandmaster of the Taoist school, why must you concern yourself with these ordinary soldiers, seeing that the surrounding Imperial Guards were increasing in number, but with the methods displayed by Liang Yue, any armor-piercing or key-breaking weapons were ineffective. Having exceeded a certain limit, more ordinary people would only increase casualties. Therefore, the old monk on the opposite side hurriedly spoke to stop him secretly. Another monk beside him was using internal force to transmit a message, urging everyone to retreat quickly, at least to the other side of the palace wall, then wait for an opportunity. Ironically, Liang Yue, relying on his current realm and subtle control over the surrounding environment, basically heard everything the other party said. Monk, haven't you realized yet that I am waiting for your experts to come? Ignoring the old monk's little thoughts, Liang Yue threw the arrow in his hand again at this moment, only to hear a whoosh sound amidst the swaying gray shadows, accompanied by a series of screams. When this arrow plunged into the crowd, it did not pierce through as before, but exploded very strangely among the Imperial Guards. In an instant, it dispersed into large pieces of seemingly tiny debris. However, under the cover of that bright purple spiritual power, these debris seemed to be endowed with infinite power, with the explosion point of the arrow as the center. All the Imperial Guards within a range of more than 20 meters were affected wherever the debris passed, whether it was the flesh of those soldiers or the armor on their bodies. They were completely without any resistance, and were directly riddled with holes. In an instant, a large cloud of blood mist rose and exploded in the crowd. The scene was too horrible to bear. The remaining Imperial Guards were so frightened that they hurriedly retreated to the back of the palace wall. The 2 old monks on the opposite side, at this time, had solemn and frightened expressions, tightly pursing their lips, their faces tense. Who is the highest martial arts master on your Liao Kingdom's side? Liang Yue didn't care about the emotional struggles in the hearts of these 2 people at this time, and asked directly. Amitabha, the one with the highest cultivation, is undoubtedly Master Zifu, the abbot of the previous generation of Fenguo Temple, who achieved the body of a Grandmaster at the young age of 30. It's just that the master is now old, already 98 years old, Presumably his Buddhist cultivation has already reached the realm of perfection, but this old monk has never heard of anyone like the Taoist priest who has achieved such great achievements. The old monk on the opposite side pondered for a while after hearing this, and then said in a deep voice, "Then who are the experts still in this capital city today? Oh, it seems that he has quite a bit of skill. Even the two masters, Liang Kong and Liang could take him down in time. Isn't that even better? Indeed, we gathered in Dengayan Tower today, and now that we are full of food and drink, it is just right to use this person for entertainment. Ha 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 ha." Just at this moment, a burst of noisy sound suddenly came from behind. This movement was initially small, but after a few breaths, it began to become a bit earth-shattering. Under the blessing of internal force, the sound spread extremely far, and even the surrounding air began to tremble a little. Liang Yu's mouth curved into a smile when he heard the sound. With a glance back, he saw 8 people flying over from the Imperial City Gate Tower behind him almost simultaneously. Among these people, their appearances were different. Some were as strong as wrestlers on the grassland, some were as shrewd as special forces soldiers in the army, some were as fat as pigs, but they insisted on dressing up as Maitreya Buddha, with a strong smell of sweat on their bodies, and some were so old that they looked like they could be blown down by a gust of wind, with a faint pale green aura on their faces. There was also one who, judging from his appearance, had the same profession as Liang Yue. Dressed in a simple Taoist robe, holding a whisk in his hand, and standing there with a calm expression. After these 8 people landed, their gazes focused on Liang Yue almost simultaneously. The expressions in their eyes were the same as when Liang Yue looked at them, equally unscrupulous, with a hint of interested anticipation mixed in. 8 grandmasters, plus 2 old monks if you count the previous 2, that's 12. It's barely worth my trip. While muttering to himself, Liang Yue looked back at the 2 old monks whose faces had relaxed a bit due to the arrival of reinforcements, then shook his hands, and a pair of purple short swords suddenly fell from his wide sleeves into his palms facing these 10 grandmaster level figures present. Liang Yue didn't act rashly because, according to his observation, a relatively common criterion for judging so-called grandmaster level figures is to make their cultivation reach the innate realm. In other words, no matter what his talent, skill, hobby, or school is, only when his cultivation realm reaches the innate realm is he qualified to be called a grandmaster. According to this standard, the power level of this water margin hero world should probably be similar to the twin dragons of the Tang Dynasty world. The beginning of a grandmaster is innate. As for whether there are more metaphysical grandmasters, or even higher level shattered void level powerhouses, that is temporarily unknown. However, judging from Liang Yu's own experience and perception, there is a high probability that such a realm level exists, but it is hard to say how many people can reach it at this moment. Although his cultivation is far superior to the group of people around him, and he has become too specious, the lion still needs to do his best to fight the rabbit. Not to mention that he is here to establish his power this time. If he indulges too much in sparring and comparing moves with each other, and can't open the gap, wouldn't that also make the people watching the situation behind him look down on him? Thinking of this, a trace of murderous intent naturally began to rise in Liang Yu's heart in an instant, although his face still carried a faint smile. The feeling he gave people was completely different. Also at this moment, with the rise of the killing intent in his heart, a cloud of hazy purple light suddenly spread out like a mist. With Liang Yue as the center, it instantly covered a radius of more than 100 meters, different from the bright purple light of the past. At this moment, in this purple mist, it has already taken on some heavy blood color. However, this is not surprising, because what Liang Yue is currently displaying is the field-like ability that he has been researching, and the field is closely related to the caster's spiritual power and even inner thoughts, taking people as the foundation to influence and transform the surrounding world. This is the essence of the field. The blood color in this purple light is a portrayal of Liang Yu's heart at this moment. Chapter 495. Poor Dao. Everyone be careful. The old monk behind him, seeing the purple light surge forward, was instantly covered by it. Suddenly, he seemed to realize something. His expression changed drastically, and he quickly reminded them. However, it was already too late. Swish, accompanied by a sudden golden flash, a giant sword, fully 20 meters long, instantly appeared behind the 8 people. Followed by a simple horizontal sweep, silently, yet exceptionally swift. On the spot, it cut a burly, robust man and the fat man dressed as Maitreya Buddha in half. The remaining 6 seemed very clever, and after noticing the anomaly behind them, they subconsciously dodged in various directions. As for the burly man and Maitreya Buddha, They seemed not very skilled in lightness techniques and had great confidence in their physical bodies and true energy cultivation. They subconsciously chose to resist head-on, and the result was self-evident in the face of the almost indestructible high-level sword light. How could this kind of response leave any chance of survival? The opponent is tough, be careful. While leaping and somersaulting, a lean man, while speaking, did not forget to take out a metal short stick and a spearhead from his back. With a twist of the short stick, it immediately spiraled upwards, transforming into a long staff of about 1.3 meters, and he forcefully inserted the spearhead into the end, instantly interlocking the head and tail, forming a solid spear. After landing, he immediately adopted a horse stance, and as he moved, a mountain-like spirit suddenly burst forth. Immediately afterwards, this person also shook two spear flowers, scattering a patch of whirling spear shadows in front of him. However, at this moment, a golden long sword instantly rose up from the man's crotch, with the momentum of a trapped dragon ascending to the sky, soaring from the solid ground. However, compared to the old man's figure, his methods were still somewhat worth seeing. While flying up, he did not forget to launch a concealed counterattack against Liang Yue. Those were several extremely light cow hair needles, which were also painted gray, and as his sleeves waved, the old man threw them out with subtle techniques during the flight. These cow hair needles even took a detour in the air, suddenly falling from above Liang Yue's head carrying a strange force. It was slow at first, almost silent, but in the latter half, the speed could even continue to increase. Knowing that Liang Yue's body was covered with a thick layer of golden light curse and purple aura shield, he still had to use this kind of hidden weapon technique that looked harmless. It can be imagined that the old man's offensive probably contained some kind of defense-breaking attribute. At the same time, the other party's methods and style also made Liang Yue unconsciously think of the old eunuch who used to be stationed in the imperial city of Dadu in the world of heavenly sword and dragon-slaying saber. It was precisely because of the inheritance and teaching of that old fellow that Liang Yue had now become a hidden weapon master. Although he didn't use this method to defend against enemies much in the latter half of the Naruto plot, he had already practiced that technique of urging hidden weapons to the full level. The cow hair needles, which were as light as nothing in front of him, naturally couldn't cause any impact on Liang Yue before they even got close to him within 10 meters. They were swept up by an invisible force, just like the arrows that the Forbidden Army had fired at him before, and fell lightly in front of him. The old man in the air was immediately shocked, and his eyebrows shrank. Clang clang dong dong immediately afterwards, accompanied by a series of continuous, clear and melodious sounds. This piece of cow hair needle was instantly shot out under Liang Yue's graceful dance of fingers. Different from the strange trajectory of the old man in the opposite midair using hidden weapons, the chaotic red flower rain inherited from the old eunuch focused on straightforwardness, with strength, angle, and internal force attached, buzz and a dizzying long cry. The cow hair needle was stained with a touch of purple. With a light touch, Liang Yue had already injected great force, making the hidden weapon, which was so thin that it was almost imperceptible, turned into deadly light and shadow. At this moment, in the blink of an eye, 3 people were hit, and their body-protecting true energy and armor did not play any role at all. The cow hair needles directly drilled into their bodies, and then were detonated by the spiritual power attached to them by Liang Yue. In the face of absolute strength, these 3 Grandmaster-level figures, who seemed unattainable in the eyes of the world, had no resistance at all at this moment. At that time, their intestines were torn apart, their internal organs were ruined, and they vomited blood in large gulps, until they fell powerlessly to the ground. Then, as if still unwilling, they looked in the direction of Liang Yue with unclosed eyes. However, Liang Yue had no time to pay attention to them at this moment. With a leap, he had already arrived between the remaining 2, the old Taoist priest and the old man who used hidden weapons. With a wave of the double swords in his hand, the golden sword light instantly cut through the 20-meter sky on the left and right. The only remaining 2 latecomers obviously did not expect that Liang Yue's methods would be so direct and sudden. In a light and breezy way, they showed a speed that was beyond their understanding. The 2 Grandmasters were just cut off by the sword light, and their heads were separated from their bodies. Looking back, I saw the 2 old monks behind Liang Yue. At this time, one of them took action, wanting to rush forward to cooperate with the 8 Grandmasters on this side, but was quietly entangled to death by a purple vine that appeared out of thin air. The vine looked very slender, with short and sharp thorns growing on the surface, vaguely translucent, and containing violent red and blue colors inside. It was one of the abilities transformed by Liang Yue with the Thunder Fire Wood domain. No matter how the old monk struggled, he couldn't break free. Instead, he was pricked all over with holes by the thorns on the vine, and blood flowed continuously. The next moment, with a thought from Liang Yue, the person was strangled on the spot, His body twisted, his chest collapsed, his eyes were red, and he died bleeding from his 7 orifices, and the other old monk showed unexpected peace. Even though his companion died in front of him, he did not make any movements throughout the whole process. Seeing Liang Yue walking step by step, the old monk also very simply put his hands together, gave him a slight salute, and then said with a low eyebrow and a pleasing expression, resignedly, Amitabha. The lives of these 11 grandmasters should be able to eliminate the indignation in the hearts of the seniors. These 2 senior brothers of mine have also left one after another. If this poor monk leaves again, the sect behind me will inevitably suffer, and the inheritance of the master's sect may not be preserved. Therefore, this poor monk boldly asks the seniors to leave one life behind. Liang Yue heard the words, looked at the old monk in front of him, and after a moment, waved his sleeves, and a golden light instantly cut through. As you wish. The next moment, the old monk's legs were immediately broken off at the knees and fell to the ground. However, although his legs were broken, the old monk's face was full of unawareness at this moment. Instead, he smiled at him with a trace of gratitude, as if relieved of a heavy burden. Thank you, senior, for showing mercy. Well, in this way, this matter is over, and I should go back. Seeing this, Liang Yue felt a little bored in his heart, so he waved his sleeves, turned around and was about to leave. Dare to ask, senior, can you leave a name for the latecomers to learn from? Although Liang Yue did not look back at this time, the expression on the old monk's face was still completely seen by him. It was a complex look of unwillingness, hesitation, but with a few expectations and tremors. This poor Taoist, Qing Yuanzi. After saying that, Liang Yue jumped lightly, and when he appeared again, the whole person was already in the air hundreds of meters away. The next moment, he flew away like a shooting star towards the distance. Chapter 496. Daxianguo Temple. Regardless of the turmoil his actions might cause in Shengjing Linhuan Prefecture, Liang Yue no longer concerned himself with such matters. As the saying goes, a master's victory lies in a single moment, and this was especially true for him to call it a rampage. In truth, from the moment Liang Yue descended upon the Liao dynasty's palace to the time he defeated 11.5 grandmasters and calmly departed, the actual time spent was no more than 5 minutes. The time Liang Yue spent traveling far exceeded the so-called decisive battle. As before, in less than half an hour, he had returned to his home in Bianliang City. An hour later, the little ones in the house had all returned to their rooms. Compared to the unease of the previous few days, they were now beginning to adapt to life in Liang Yue's home, and to their impending fate of being inducted into the sect with hope for the future, no longer living a precarious existence in the refugee, constantly facing survival crises. They were finally regaining some of the vigor befitting their age. The experience of being a refugee might be a lifelong psychological burden for a young child, but for a group of 60 or 70 children, it was often just a memory. The power of the collective was far more miraculous than imagined, with a group of peers sharing the same fate huddling together for warmth. That invisible sense of belonging allowed them to recover quickly from their predicament, especially knowing that there was still hope for their future. And so, after finishing their evening lessons in reading and writing, these children of similar ages were still lively in their respective rooms. Still others had temporarily put aside their past experiences and were now dreaming about their future lives and destinies through the not-so-thick walls and paper windows. Liang Yue could clearly understand the conversations of these children as they intertwined imperceptibly. Even he himself seemed to be infected. Slowly calming the ripples and excitement that had just arisen in his heart from the killings, a feeling called peace began to gradually occupy Liang Yue's heart. In a similar situation were Siko Senpei, Alwyn, Nanlik Xiang, and others, who were sitting around the magma stove in the center of the courtyard nibbling on nuts, sweet potatoes, and grilled corn from the stove. They were casually drinking fruit wine and discussing their future development and plans in the public world. For a time, laughter and chatter filled the air. The scene was exceptionally harmonious, with a lava firelight and the night sky complementing each other. Soon, Liang Yue also joined them. Putting his arm around Hanida's supple body and chatting with the women about the events of the evening. During the process, he also made sure to show off the spoils of war he had seized from the grandmasters of the Liao dynasty. One by one, the cowhair needles seemingly coated with poison, the lean man's modular spear, the old monk's vajra, and so on. Soon, morning arrived the next day unexpectedly. The group of villains whom Liang Yue had expected to attack under the cover of night had not rushed to his door last night. It seemed that while the world map was rare and exceptionally precious, the Grandmaster sects of the Jiang who would not act rashly without understanding the true strength of Liang Yue and his group. This was undoubtedly bad news for Liang Yue, who was eager to seize spoils of war from those unscrupulous people and was even considering whether to take the opportunity to go to their door and reap another wave of spoils. After all, The fact that he had single-handedly killed several grandmasters in the imperial city of Liao last night could not be concealed, even if such things might not be widely spread among ordinary people and merchants, but for the grandmasters of various factions, who had many connections, and the even more powerful members of the Song dynasty's imperial family. This was no secret. Within a few days, it was expected that someone's actions would be spread to the ears of many people at that time, for a considerable period of time. He would have no chance to legitimately cause trouble again. In the morning, with the rising sun, Liang Yue finished his routine morning exercises, took care of his personal hygiene, and then came to the courtyard to have breakfast with the others, who had just finished 2 rounds of calisthenics under the guidance of teacher Shizuka. Afterward, the children were sent to the side courtyard to continue their studies. Saya-chan was considering with a troubled expression whether to continue working at the small shop supermarket this morning, or to join others in going to the Daxiangua temple outside the city to go to the market and shopping. Liang Yue, on the other hand, as usual, spread out the Zhuan paper, dipped it in ancient ink, and began to practice regular script calligraphy. After a period of experimentation, he had gradually found his own rhythm and direction. Running script was his favorite font so far among them. He especially loved Wen Hengming's writing style, gentle and vigorous, with strict rules. In order to strengthen his own calligraphy skills, Liang Yue had recently purchased many calligraphy copybooks and tracing books by Wen Hengming. Now, with the blessing of the regular script calligraphy skill, his pen had somewhat acquired the charm of the style. In a happy mood, Liang Yue began to pay more and more attention to his calligraphy practice. About half an hour later, the family's butler ran over to announce that a small eunuch had come from the palace. Only after meeting him did he know that the other party had come for the promise that Rinzong had made to him yesterday. Simply put, it was about the iron-eating beasts he had obtained from Emperor Rinzong. Zhaozhen. The people in the palace had obviously received the imperial decree, but considering that the panda species had a certain degree of danger, the little eunuch had come to confirm the receiving location on Liang Yue's site if it was inconvenient. He said that they could temporarily store it in a royal estate in the suburbs, and send it over after his mountain gate was built. To this, Liang Yue also declined the other party's kindness, saying that it would be fine to send it directly to his mansion. The little eunuch didn't think much of it when he heard this, so he turned around to report back. However, before leaving, Liang Yue also subtly signaled to the butler to put a dozen taels of silver into the other party's hand as a greeting gift, as a way to build goodwill. Chapter 497 Bumblebee. As expected, in the following days, news of what happened in the Liao Kingdom's imperial city began to spread to Bianlian through various channels. Whether it was the royalty and nobles or the common people, most had heard something about it. The difference was that the former had more professional information channels and a more comprehensive understanding of the matter. The latter only heard rumors, and the sources of information were too fragmented and complex. They only vaguely knew that someone had made a scene in the Liao Kingdom's imperial palace and had killed many grandmaster-level figures of the Liao Kingdom on the spot. However, they had no clear idea of who did it or which grandmasters were killed anyway. For a time, various speculations were emerging in the streets and alleys in order to compensate and make amends, and to apologize for their previous assassination attempt in the downtown area. The Liao Kingdom's embassy in Bianlian specially sent a carriage with 3 large boxes of gifts. One evening the contents were nothing more than some gold, silver, and jewelry, precious animal furs, and some aged medicinal materials. Although Liang Yue didn't really care for such things, he didn't refuse them anyway. In Liang Yue's opinion, the assassination attempt was already in the past. Starting from when he returned from the Liao Kingdom, he wouldn't refuse something for nothing. From then on, Liang Yue's initial missions in this public world were basically completed in the following days. In addition to continuing his daily cultivation and occasionally teaching the children at home, he spent most of his time in the southwestern mountains outside Bianlian, supervising the construction side of the sect. In this way, another 3 days passed in the blink of an eye according to the time exchange ratio given by the system at the beginning, and the clock reminder from the intelligent Xiao. It should now be the early morning of the second day. In reality, in order not to delay anything, after saying hello to the women, Liang Yue flashed out of the public world, took a detour in Mick, and returned directly to the manor. In reality, who knew that as soon as he appeared, he discovered that there seemed to be guests at home. Sam, what happened to you? And who is this lady? In the hall of his manor villa, Sam was lying sprawled on the sofa, fast asleep, covered in oil and sweat. Moreover, the young man was holding a shapely girl in his arms at the moment. More strangely, in front of the two, next to the sofa, a yellow sports car was parked in the spacious living room. The first thing Liang Yue did upon returning to reality was to connect with a clone left behind by the intelligent Xiao, and he naturally understood what had happened in his manner last night, but to be on the safe side, he still woke the two up, knowing full well what happened, and went through the process with them. "Oh hey, Liang Yue, oh sorry, I came to your house last night. Listen to me, buddy. Something big is about to happen. Aliens are preparing to attack Earth. I was chased all the way last night, crossing most of New York City to get here. Alright, this is Michaela, the one I told you about before, my high school classmate. She just transferred here yesterday. This is Bumblebee soon," under Sam's somewhat incoherent, confused, and excited narration. Liang Yue roughly understood what had happened last night. Liang Yue had already spent a lot of money to buy the glasses a few days ago, but the aliens from Cybertron didn't know, so they still went to Sam first yesterday afternoon. Sam, on the other hand, had just received financial support from Liang Yue, and his inner confidence had soared, so he took the initiative to approach and accepted the task of taking his old classmate Michaela to familiarize herself with the school environment. In the original plan, the two were supposed to go out for a meal last night, watch a movie, and then return to the school dormitory. It was an ordinary arrangement, but something went wrong on a bustling pedestrian street. A Decepticon found them. And then Bumblebee, who had been secretly observing, came to the rescue immediately afterwards. The two chased each other all the way, and under Sam's guidance, they crossed most of New York City and arrived at Liang Yue's house. As for the Decepticon who had been chasing them all the way, it was shot into received by an electromagnetic cannon controlled by Xiao's clone as soon as it entered Liang Yue's manor. Bumblebee, on the other hand, was spared because of Sam's familiar face. "Hello, buddy." After finishing his meal, Liang Yue reached out and patted the yellow sports car in front of him, greeting it gurgle gurgle. The next moment, accompanied by a dazzling transformation and mechanical electronic sound, the sports car in front of him turned into Bumblebee's appearance, and responded to Liang Yue with a movie quote, "Hello sir, when will your main force arrive on Earth?" "Probably, in about half a month, sir." "That's good, then, how about you be responsible for protecting my classmate during this time? I estimate that he will encounter a lot of trouble afterwards." "No problem, but what about you? I think the glasses seem to be with you." After identifying the target, "The Decepticons will keep coming, don't worry, I have the ability to protect myself." As he spoke, the group had already passed through the gate of the villa and arrived in the yard. Looking around, they saw a pile of parts scattered all over a lawn more than 100 meters away. From the incomplete mechanical limbs, one could barely recognize that it was once a robot. A moment later, the group arrived nearby. However, before Liang Yue could examine it carefully, a phone call suddenly came in at this moment from the display screen of the intelligent Xiao. It could be seen that the caller was Tony Stark. After connecting, Stark's big head immediately appeared on the other side of the video. The background seemed to be inside the Iron Man armor. To be precise, he should be in flight right now. "Hello, Tony." "Hello, kid, I heard your house was attacked again last night, an accidental intruder. It's been dealt with." "How did you know?" "That guy was bombing all the way with machine guns and rockets last night. Although the damage wasn't great, I believe many people know about it. If I'm not mistaken, it should be a robot, right? The kind that can transform into a car." "Almost. It's actually a mechanical race from an alien planet, with intelligence as high as humans, but they seem to be divided into two factions for some reason. Two of my classmates have also been caught up in it." "Okay, it seems that things are a bit more complicated than I thought. Originally, I was just planning to go and take a look at the technical level of this robot now. I'm afraid we need to reformulate a response plan. I can probably get there in 3 minutes. In addition, some other departments will probably get involved in this matter. You need to be mentally prepared." "I didn't know that you've become my agent, Mr. Stark." "Oh, there are many things you don't know, kid. To be honest, I've been secretly blocking a lot of trouble for you during this time." "Thank you, then I'll see you in a while." "See you in a while." Chapter 498. Goodbye General Ross. He packed up the pile of parts and mechanical limbs in front of him, wrapped them with spiritual power, and brought them all the way back to the open space in front of the villa. Turning his head to look, Liang Yue noticed that Sam and Michaela were indeed not in good condition at this time. They looked tired, their faces were greasy, and their clothes were torn and stained with oil, so he instructed Xiao to take Sam and Michaela to take a bath. Also, prepare some clothes for them. As soon as he finished speaking, Xiao's virtual image appeared in front of the villa, and then he made a gesture of invitation to the two of them. "Go ahead. I guess someone will be looking for you to ask questions later." "Then thank you, buddy, it's no trouble. Ever since I got that pair of glasses from you, I've been expecting this kind of situation. Remember what I said before. This is a good thing for me, okay. Just a few seconds after the two of them walked into the villa, a burst of flying and shuttling sounds came from the distant sky. Liang Yue knew without looking that with such unbridled flying, the visitor must be Tony Stark. After landing, the steel armor immediately disassembled itself, and then Stark's old face full of amazement was revealed. Needless to say, Old Man Stark's expression was definitely not for Liang Yue. His target was Bumblebee, who was standing aside with his hands on his hips at the moment. Hey, hello, big guy, I'm Tony Stark. Hello sir, I am Bumblebee. Bumblebee, good name. Thank you. Hey, I found that you seem to be able to turn into some kind of brand name sports car from us, Earth, last night. Is this just a coincidence, or can you turn into any kind of car? As long as the corresponding data model can be provided, I can turn into any shape of car. Awesome. Then what about motorcycles? Motorcycles are too small for me. There is no need. However, there are some smaller individuals among us Transformers who can turn into motorcycles and various small cars. Some smaller existences can even disguise themselves as some household appliances, mobile phones, watches, etc. Wow. Cool, buddy. So what about flying? Can you turn into a plane or a helicopter or something? This requires installing or modifying the corresponding power unit. Our Autobots lost the corresponding facilities after leaving our home planet, but maybe this problem can be solved after Ironhide arrives. Ironhide, that's our boss, Optimus Prime's weapon development expert. OV. Looking at Old Man Stark, who was getting information from Bumblebee little by little through questions and answers, Liang Yue stood aside for a while without intending to stop him or interrupt. After all, as a group of aliens unknown to the vast majority of people on Earth, it is indeed necessary to understand them well. Now that they have suddenly appeared in people's vision, both humans and Transformers need to understand each other's positions, purposes, and some views in their hearts. Although Liang Yue already has a lot of knowledge about the Transformers as a species, other people also need this process soon. From the time Tony Stark arrived, it was only about 5 minutes. When Stark had already begun to discuss a certain technical issue with Bumblebee, a buzzing sound came from the distant sky. Again Liang Yue turned his head and saw that the visitor was riding a Quinjet. Needless to say, being able to drive this unreleased model of fighter jet all over the United States so blatantly is most likely someone from S.H.I.E.L.D. And now, at this moment of meeting this rare species of mechanical alien, the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. must personally come forward. Liang Yue believed that Stark should have communicated with Nick Fury on the way here. In addition, as the current director of S.H.I.E.L.D., Nick Fury should also know that there are Transformers on Earth as an alien species, whether it was joining the Allied forces in World War II, the frozen Megatron in the Hoover Dam, or the humanoid butler of a certain noble duke in England. They all indicated this. Although Transformers are very far away from ordinary people, they may not necessarily feel strange to people at certain levels. Of course, knowing is one thing, but whether or not they can establish a connection with a species, or even reach a cooperative relationship, is another matter. Looking through the entire plot of S.H.I.E.L.D., their existence is special, and their abilities can be described as vast, but there is not much connection with the Transformers. Therefore, this meeting is very important, and it is worth Director Fury's personal visit. Sure enough, as soon as the fighter plane landed and the rear hatch opened, Liang Yue knew that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s site attached more importance to this meeting than he had imagined, because at this time, it was not just Director Nick Fury who walked out of the cabin. He was followed by Captain America Steve, Miss Natasha, Hawkeye, and even Liang Yue's neighbor, Coulson, who had always been portrayed as a good old man. Hello Bumblebee, I'm very glad to be able to see you. After Director Fury arrived, a black face was also accompanied by a smile that he thought was kind, revealing a mouthful of white teeth, and said to Bumblebee here. At the same time, others were also puzzled by this and looked at the black director. Of course, and I have admired your name for a long time. You have made important contributions to the peace of Earth. Nick Fury responded with a serious face when he saw this. Is that so? In a certain period of time in the past, there was a problem with my vocal system and memory storage device, and a considerable amount of information cannot be read temporarily. Oh, that's a pity. I seem to have heard about you too. It was during World War II. The British seem to have formed a special operations force to carry out beheading operations against. Unfortunately, our targets at the time were not the same, and we did not have any combat cooperation. I always thought that Bumblebee was just the name of that special operations force. Unexpectedly, they were talking about you, buddy. Captain America, who had been somewhat silent before, suddenly interjected. At this time it was rare to encounter people and things he was familiar with. At this time, the captain seemed a little happy, and his originally serious face also showed a smile. It seems that the time he woke up was indeed a bit short. It's not that he didn't want to communicate, but he really lacked the opportunity to play. Sorry, I still can't remember. It doesn't matter. Cackle. At this moment, a burst of violent rotation of helicopter rotors suddenly came from the other side of the sky. Liang Yue turned his head and saw that this time's uninvited guest was a military helicopter painted in dark green camouflage, through his eyesight far superior to ordinary people. He saw a familiar figure in the cabin. That was Betty's father, the representative of the military's hardliners, the implementer and leader of the Hulk project, Lieutenant General Ross. Chapter 499 Man in Black? What a rare guest, I didn't expect you to come. Looking at General Ross, dressed in a tough, old-fashioned military uniform, Liang Yue felt a complex mix of emotions towards him. Originally, based on Liang Yue's personality, he definitely wouldn't welcome someone who held real power in the national violent apparatus and liked to be aggressive. But now, the other party was Betty's father, his girlfriend's father, or more accurately, Liang Yue's future father-in-law. That's a matter between you two young people. I believe you can handle it yourselves. After saying that, the old guy bypassed Liang Yue with satisfaction, glanced at the scattered parts and mechanical wreckage on the ground, and walked directly to Bumblebee. He sized up the big guy in front of him, struck a pose, and then asked, I am a representative from the United States military. You can call me General Ross. I need to understand the purpose of you and your people coming to Earth as expected of a representative from the military. So direct, he wanted to seize the initiative in the conversation right from the start, and then interrogate with a condescending attitude. Completely different approaches from the roundabout Stark and the Shield, who tried to build rapport and get close from the get-go. To be honest, Liang Yue didn't like this kind of attitude. However, he could understand the confidence behind the other party's posture. After all, this was America. And the people here had been confident since childhood, especially since this was a comprehensive world centered on American comics. Whether it was from the starting point of the plot or the arrangement of the director's script, everything was built upon the strength and righteous stance of this country. The air was filled with the idea that how dare you bully me in the world I created. Even those aliens who came from afar and possessed powerful combat capabilities had to honestly accept judgment and adjudication upon arriving in this land. Otherwise, it would be incorrect. As a Chinese person for 2 lifetimes, Liang Yue was naturally disgusted with this ubiquitous stance. However, he didn't have time to bother with the old man's attitude problem now, because another wave of guests was coming, right behind Ross, and among these visitors, there was an acquaintance of his. It was Chief Stacy, who had brought his family to Liang Yue's manor for vacation before. As the commissioner of the New York City Police Department, the official in charge of the daily security rights within New York, he naturally had reason to investigate the violent shootout that occurred on the streets of New York last night. However, it was hard to say about the other group of people following behind his vehicle. They were a group of men in black, wearing uniform black suits, but they were definitely not the legendary Men in Black. Because judging from their equipment, they weren't very professional. Liang Yue was sure that he had never been in contact with them before. Could it be those idiots? In just a few minutes, this team followed the road in front of his house and arrived at Liang Yue's manor, one after another. During this time, Liang Yue himself finally picked up his basic etiquette. As the host, he waved his hand and took out a round table and a few chairs from the mic, and then placed them on the spot, directly turning the small, bird-singing and flower-filled square in front of the villa into negotiation site. He also pretended to take out a pile of fruits, coffee, and other things from the villa to entertain them. Natasha also took the initiative to take over the task of pouring tea and water. At this time, Liang Yue then walked behind Bumblebee, built a wooden platform for him to use as a stool with solid wood blocks, and waved his hand to take out 2 large tin buckets. After finishing, he patted his knee and said, "Sit down, buddy. This is 200-octane aviation gasoline, and this is the best lubricant on the market. If you have any other requests, just let me know." "Oh, thank you, Mr. Liang Yue, you're welcome." While speaking, the convoy located outside the manor gate had already slowly driven over. With Liang Yue's tacit approval, everyone present naturally recognized Commissioner Stacy, a major figure in American politics. So Director Fury, General Ross, and others also took the initiative to greet him. After a brief greeting, they turned their attention to the other group of people. Those were 3 modified SUVs, and a total of 12 people got out after the cars stopped, facing Bumblebee sitting on the wooden platform on the side. These people seemed a little nervous, and subconsciously pulled out the small handguns from behind their waists. Then, without even bothering to greet, they bypassed Ross and others and slowly approached. Then, just as Bumblebee became alert and stood up in preparation, Liang Yue stood in front of these people. "Get out of the way. Kid, we're taking over here now. Also, you'd better proactively explain your relationship with this big guy." This involves the survival and safety of mankind. If you don't explain clearly, you might have to spend the rest of your life in jail. Picking up soap every day after speaking, the leading man in black reached out a hand to Liang Yue, intending to push him away by pressing on his shoulder. Unfortunately, he didn't budge. Liang Yue's mouth suddenly curved into a smile, and then he was too lazy to say anything more. With a wave of his hand, a strange attractive force suddenly appeared in just an instant. It forcibly sucked the guns from these people's hands, suspended them quietly in his palm, and gently pinched them. After a burst of crackling sounds, the guns were instantly twisted into a puddle of paste. Xiao Wu, fire a few stun bullets to help them calm down. After speaking, Liang Yue retreated to the side, and in the flower bed on the other side, a small, 8-barreled Gatling gun turret instantly rose. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. After a quick swing, bullets flashing with faint blue electric light were fired almost simultaneously, hitting the men in black in front of them. In the blink of an eye, the moment they were hit, the 12 people in front of them screamed miserably, and then convulsed wildly, falling to the ground. They soon began to foam at the mouth. The leaping arcs of electricity made Nick Fury, General Ross, Commissioner Stacy, and others twitch their eyes and show expressions of sympathy. Are those stun bullets a weapon recently developed by Xiao Wu? If I'm not mistaken, the shell of this bullet seems to be made of glass, but isn't its electricity content a bit too high? Stark came to Liang Yue's side with great interest at this time, squatted down, pointed at the group of men in black who were still convulsing in front of him, and asked, "Don't worry, each of these stun bullets is injected with electricity by Xiao Wu according to different individuals and species, and then fired specifically point to point. The person hit will lose the ability to move in a short period of time, but there will be no danger to life, and even their health will not be substantially damaged." "Oh, I understand. Is this a treatment plan you've developed for certain specific groups of people, something like that? After all, not everyone who breaks into my house without permission deserves to die." "That's true too." Chapter 500 Winery. "Why, you little brat? You've gotten yourself into big trouble. How dare you use violence to attack American government law enforcement personnel? I'll send you to jail." Ugh. Liang Yue squatted down next to Stark, watching the middle-aged man in front of him, who was still twitching from the after effects of the electric shock, unable to speak clearly, but still glaring at him with a threatening look. Liang Yue immediately smiled and responded to the man in black in front of him. "Government law enforcement personnel? Then may I ask which law enforcement department you are from? Do you have written documents such as a search warrant?" "I'm from Sector 7. Not only do I have a search warrant, I also have an arrest warrant." "Little brat, it's too late to admit defeat. Just wait to die." "Sector 7? Which department is that?" Hearing the other party announce their affiliation, Liang Yue secretly thought, as expected, but on his face, he still looked at Stark with a somewhat bewildered expression. "Never heard of it." Stark frowned and thought for a moment, then shook his head. "Weren't they with you before?" Hearing this, Ross looked at him with some surprise. "The truth is, they came to my office this morning with an executive order asking me to be responsible for bringing them here. I checked the document, and there shouldn't be any problems, but on the way here, I called the Secretary of Defense, several familiar members of Congress, and even the whips of both parties, but none of them had heard of anything about Sector 7. Chief Stacy also looked strange at this time, looking at the dozen or so figures on the ground wriggling like caterpillars, with a hint of schadenfreude in his eyes. "So, is it possible that you are impersonating law enforcement personnel?" Hearing the words of the people behind him, Liang Yue flipped his wrist, and a pistol was immediately in his palm. Gesturing at the man in black in front of him, "I think this possibility should be quite high." It was rare to see a group whose style of doing things was even more reckless than his own, so General Ross's attitude seemed somewhat ambiguous at this time. Sipping his coffee while standing aside, his words also carrying a bit of incitement, the situation seemed to be that he wanted to use Liang Yue's hand to clean up this group of men in black from an unknown department. However, Liang Yue would certainly not fall for his trick, but instead took advantage of the old guy's words to go downhill. "See, there are very few people here who like you." Hearing this, the man in black's eyes widened, and he looked around. Finally, he focused his gaze on the other side, where Director Nick Fury was squatting on the ground, busy checking the pile of mechanical parts, seemingly having no time to participate in the statement. After staring for a while, he realized that the other party had no intention of answering, so he simply lowered his head and admitted defeat, looking at Liang Yue with a slightly softer tone. "Okay, I admit, we were indeed a bit reckless before, but there's no need to doubt our identities at all. The security level of Sector 7 itself is very high, directly under the orders of the president, and it has a considerable degree of independent authority. It's normal for ordinary people not to know. I think we can sit down and have a good talk after the numbness and convulsions had just passed. The middle-aged man slightly adjusted his posture, sat directly on the ground, and then looked around again, before introducing himself with a sigh. "My name is Simmons, one of the main people in charge of Sector 7." As he said that, he very sensibly took the initiative to extend a hand of friendship to Liang Yue. Seeing this, Liang Yue did not refuse, shook hands with the other party, and took the opportunity to pull him up. At this moment, Sam and Michaela also walked out of the villa hand in hand after taking a shower and changing clothes. The two now looked much more energetic. By the way, since the fully automatic textile machine was brought into reality, under the integration of the intelligent brain Xiao Wu, various clothing styles can be made instantly with the help of Xiao Wu. Selecting or designing a style of clothing only takes a few minutes to complete the entire process from fabric selection to textile clothing. After completion, there will be special intelligent robots to send the clothes to their respective rooms. The clothes worn by Sam and Michaela in front of them are brand new products they made themselves. After the atmosphere on the scene became harmonious, the people in front of them finally began to enter today's theme at the beginning of the discussion. The military, Sector 7, and the New York Police Department all spoke up and gave important guiding opinions on the future security and defense affairs of the United States and the Earth. Of course, during the meeting, the main speaker here was actually Bumblebee, as a representative of the Transformers. Sam and Michaela, as the direct witnesses and victims of the chase last night, were also allowed to make a supplementary statement on the side. It was a bit unexpected that Shield and Stark did not elaborate much on this matter. Most of the time, they sat quietly in their seats, drinking beverages and eating fruit, while listening to the speeches of others. However, in private, Nick Fury quietly came to Liang Yue's side and very slyly discussed with him the issue of the ownership of the pile of scattered parts and mechanical remains on the ground. "So, we at S.H.I.E.L.D. want to obtain the wreckage of this robot from your hands at a reasonable price or consideration. So, S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to make a deal with me again. You could say that if I remember correctly, we have had a deal before, and it has not been completed until now. To be precise, I have already taken out what you want, but S.H.I.E.L.D. has not yet fulfilled its original promise. Under this circumstance, why should I believe your sincerity?" Looking at the black director in front of him, who was leaning his head closer and whispering to him, Liang Yue narrowed his eyes and said unceremoniously, "Regarding the last matter, S.H.I.E.L.D. has been taking action. The guy's property has actually been recovered almost completely, but there have been some problems in France specifically. Some people in their country have taken a fancy to 2 wineries under that guy's name and have been using their influence to obstruct the implementation of property ownership." "Wineries? Those 2, the plantations that produce wine? Then sell them to them, as long as the price is right and you don't lose money. Are you sure? The quality and brewing technology of those 2 wineries' wines have a very good reputation and brand effect globally, and even involve a medium-sized secret wine barrel supply chain. Don't tell me these useless things. No matter how good the wine they brew is, it's not as good as my own. And I'm not interested in those so-called wines at all." "That's true. Based on the quality of the ancient fruit wine you took out before, you really can't find anything on earth that can compare to it. So, is that settled?" "Yes, just contact the other party directly and sell those 2 wineries. Then about the remains of this robot, let's complete our last deal first, okay?" End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.